What if Deku was betrayed and became the Overlord of RWBY verse with massive breeding harem of RWBY, Weiss, Blake, Yang and Salem Chapter 1, The Fall and the Landing. The restraints burned. Not from heat, from the quirk suppression tech woven into the metal. Every time Izuku flexed his wrists, the bands pulsed with a sickly yellow light and sent needles of pain shooting up through his forearms into his shoulders. He'd been strapped to this table for 6 hours. Maybe 7. Hard to tell when the room had no windows and the fluorescent lights never changed. The HPSC black site sat somewhere underneath Tokyo. That much he'd figured out from the elevator ride down, 40 seconds of descent, which put them roughly 200 feet below street level. The room was sterile white. Medical equipment lined the walls. 3 technicians in lab coats worked at terminals, not looking at him. They hadn't looked at him once since they'd strapped him down. Izuku pulled at the restraints again. The pain spiked. He stopped. The door opened. Bakugo walked in first. Full hero costume, grenade gauntlets and everything, like he'd come straight from patrol. Behind him, Todoroki. Then Yaoyorozu. Then Hawks, the number 2 hero, with his wings folded tight against his back and his expression completely flat. Izuku stared at them. "Kaken," he said. "What is this?" Bakugo didn't flinch. Didn't snarl. Didn't do any of the Bakugo things Izuku had spent his whole life cataloging and predicting. He just stood there with his arms crossed and his jaw set and said, "It's what has to happen." What has to? Izuku pulled at the restraints hard enough to make the table groan. "I didn't do it. You know I didn't do it. The Shibuya attack was, we saw the footage, Midoriya," Todoroki said. Quiet. Controlled. Not meeting his eyes. One for all energy signatures at the blast site. Your movement patterns on satellite tracking. The Commission verified, the Commission fabricated, enough. Hawks stepped forward, pulling a tablet from inside his jacket. He held it up so Izuku could see the screen. Security footage, grainy, nighttime, a figure wreathed in green lightning demolishing a city block. The figure moved like Izuku. Fought like Izuku. But Izuku had been at home that night. Alone. No alibi. No witnesses. Because he'd been doing exactly what he always did on his nights off, sitting in his apartment analyzing hero data and eating cup noodles. "That's not me," Izuku said. "The energy signature is a 98.6% match," Hawk said. "Commission labs confirmed it independently 3 times. Then your labs are wrong. Or compromised." "Hawks, think about this for 2 seconds, why would I attack Shibuya?" "What possible, we're not here to debate it," Bakugo cut in. He still wasn't looking at Izuku right. There was something in his expression that Izuku had never seen before. Guilt, maybe. Or the effort of suppressing it. The commissions made their call. One for all is too dangerous to stay in one person. Especially a person who might be compromised. The room got very cold. "Extraction," Izuku said. Bakugo said nothing. "You're going to try to extract one for all from me." "The technology's been in development since the war," Yaoyorozu said. She was standing near the back, arms wrapped around herself. She looked sick. Dr. Garaki's research was recovered from the Shigaraki operation. The Commission adapted it. They say the process is survivable. Survivable, Izuku repeated. They say. Midoriya. Todoroki finally looked at him. His mismatched eyes were steady but something behind them was cracking. "If you're innocent, this clears you. One for all gets contained. You get released. You go back to what?" Izuku's voice came out harder than he expected. "You think they'll give it back? You think this is temporary?" "Todoroki, they framed me. They manufactured evidence to justify stealing the most powerful quirk in history, and you're all just standing here letting it happen." Silence. Izuku looked at each of them. Bakugo, jaw clenched, staring at the wall. Todoroki, whose left side was flickering with tiny flames he couldn't control. Yaoyorozu, who wouldn't lift her head. Hawks, whose expression hadn't changed once. "Where's All Might?" Izuku asked. Nobody answered. "Where is he?" "He agreed to the procedure," Hawks said. "Voluntarily. He believes it's the safest course of action for." Something broke inside Izuku's chest. Not one for all. Not a bone. Something deeper and quieter than that. Something that had been holding him together since he was 4 years old, and a doctor told him he was worthless, and a man with golden hair and a giant smile had said you can be a hero. All Might had agreed. All Might had signed off on this. Izuku stopped pulling at the restraints. "Okay," he said. Bakugo's head snapped toward him. "What?" "I said okay." Izuku's voice was flat. "Empty. Do it. Start the extraction." Hawk studied him for a long moment, then nodded to the technicians. They began powering up machines. A massive apparatus descended from the ceiling, a ring of electrodes and energy siphons arranged around a central extraction needle the size of Izuku's forearm. Bakugo shifted his weight. "Deku, don't call me that." Izuku stared at the ceiling. "You don't get to call me that anymore." The machines hummed louder. The extraction needle began to glow. Inside Izuku's body, One for All responded. Not the way the commission expected. Not a passive energy source waiting to be drained. One for All was 9 lives compressed into a single burning point of power, 9 wielders who had fought and bled and died to pass this torch forward. And every single one of them was screaming. "Don't let them take us. Fight. Fight." The needle made contact with Izuku's chest. Pain, absolute, white-hot, reality-splitting pain. Izuku's back arched off the table so hard the restraints cracked. Green lightning exploded from his body in every direction. Technicians dove behind their terminals. Hawks threw up his wings as a shield. Bakugo planted his feet and raised his gauntlets. But the lightning wasn't attacking them. It was attacking the air itself. Izuku could feel it. One for All wasn't being extracted. It was being torn, and where it tore, reality tore with it. The quirk was so deeply fused with his cellular structure that ripping it out meant ripping out the fundamental forces holding his atoms in configuration. And when you tear atoms apart, you tear space apart. A crack appeared in the air 3 feet above Izuku's chest. Not a crack in the ceiling. A crack in everything. Through it, he could see colors that didn't exist, not in this world, not in any spectrum human eyes were built to process. Wind howled through the gap, pulling equipment and papers and screaming technicians toward it. "Shut it down." Hawks roared. "We can't." The energy output the crack widened. Izuku felt himself lifting off the table, the restraints finally shattering, his body pulled toward the rift. One for All blazed through every cell in his body, all the quirks, all the vestiges, firing simultaneously. Full cowling at percentages he'd never reached. Black whip lashing in every direction. Danger sense screaming so loud it became white noise. Float activating without his input, dragging him upward. Toward the crack. Toward whatever was on the other side. Izuku had one moment of clarity. One frozen heartbeat where he hung in the air with reality splitting apart around him and looked down at the people who had betrayed him. Bakugo was reaching for him. Actually reaching, palm open, not attacking. His mouth was moving, screaming something Izuku couldn't hear over the roar of collapsing spacetime. Izuku didn't reach back. The rift swallowed him. Falling. That was the first thing. Not the interdimensional transit, that was instantaneous and silent and felt like being turned inside out and then right side in again so fast that his brain couldn't process it. Just falling. Wind. Cold air. The smell of pine trees and something else, something electric, something that tasted like crystal dust on his tongue. Izuku opened his eyes and saw a massive green forest rushing up at him from below. His body was wrecked. Every muscle screamed. One for All was doing something inside him that he couldn't understand. The quirk felt different, like it was interfacing with the air itself, drawing in energy from the atmosphere and cycling it through his system. His skin crackled with green lightning that kept flickering in and out, unstable, wrong. He tried to activate float. It sputtered. Half a second of suspension, then nothing. He tried Black Whip. One tendril shot out, grabbed a tree branch, and then dissolved. He was going to hit the ground at terminal velocity with no way to stop. Izuku did the math in the 2 seconds he had left. Terminal velocity for a human body, roughly 120 miles per hour. Impact force at that speed, lethal, obviously. Unless he could channel One for All into his legs at the last second and use the reinforcement to absorb the kinetic energy. His quirk was glitching. It might not activate. He might just die in a forest in a world he didn't recognize. He tried anyway. One for All surged, not the smooth, controlled flow he'd mastered over years of training, but a raw, jagged burst of power that felt like getting struck by his own lightning. Green energy wrapped around his legs. He hit the ground feet first. The impact cratered the forest floor. Trees within 50 yards flattened outward from the blast point. Dirt and rock and shattered wood flew in every direction. Izuku went through the surface layer and into the earth beneath, punching a hole 10 feet deep before his momentum stopped. He lay at the bottom of a crater, staring up at a circle of sky framed by destroyed trees and settling dust. Everything hurt. His legs were intact, One for All had held long enough to absorb the impact. But his arms were covered in the red lightning burns he hadn't seen since his first year at UA. His ribs were cracked. Something in his left shoulder was dislocated. He pushed himself up anyway. Sitting, then kneeling, then standing. Swaying. Catching himself on the crater wall. The forest around him was enormous. Trees taller than any he'd seen in Japan, with bark that had a faint reddish tint. The sky was blue, but wrong blue, a shade lighter than Earth's sky, with clouds that moved differently. 2 moons. He could see them both even in daylight, hanging pale and distant above the tree-line. 2 moons. Not Earth, Izuku muttered. His voice was hoarse. His body sparked. Green lightning arced from his shoulder to his fingertip and then grounded itself into the crater wall, leaving a scorched mark. One for All was doing that constantly now, discharging randomly, cycling power he wasn't commanding. He needed to move. Whatever that impact crater looked like from above, it was a beacon. And his danger sense, even glitching, was picking up movement in the forest. Lots of movement. Coming toward him from every direction. Izuku climbed out of the crater. His left arm hung wrong, the shoulder was definitely dislocated. He grabbed his own wrist, braced, and yanked it back into the socket with a grinding pop that made him see stars. Then he started walking. He made it about 40 yards before the first creature broke through the tree-line. Black fur. White bone mask. Red eyes that burned with something that wasn't animal intelligence but wasn't human either. The thing was the size of a minibus, built like a wolf but wrong, too many joints, too many teeth, bone spurs protruding from its spine. Izuku's danger sense exploded. More of them. Behind him, flanking left, flanking right. He counted 8, no, 12, no, they kept coming. The crash had drawn every one of these things in the area. The first one lunged. Izuku's body moved before his brain caught up. Years of combat training didn't disappear just because his quirk was glitching. He sidestepped the lunge, drove his right fist into the creature's skull as it passed, and felt the bone mask crack under a 5% smash. The creature's head caved in and it dissolved. Just, dissolved. Into black smoke and nothing. He didn't have time to process that. The next 3 came simultaneously. 1 for all flickered. 15%, no, 8, no, 20 for a split second and then 3. His power output was surging and dropping without warning. He caught the second creature with a kick that bisected it, 20% moment, tried to punch the third and barely dented its mask, 3% moment, and had to throw himself sideways to dodge the fourth because float activated for half a second and then cut out, sending him tumbling. He rolled to his feet. More of them. 20 now, maybe more, pouring out of the forest. The big ones were hanging back, letting the smaller ones test him. Pack tactics. These things were smart. Izuku's analytical brain did what it always did, categorized, assessed, strategized. Bone masks were the weak point. They dissolved on death, so no physical remains. They were attracted to his crash site. Possibly attracted to negative emotion. His danger sense was spiking harder around the ones closest to him, like they were feeding on his fear and pain and getting stronger from it. He killed the fear. Not suppressed it. Killed it. Whatever capacity he'd once had for being afraid of battle had been burned out of him somewhere between the restraint table and the dimensional rift. He was done being afraid. 1 for all responded. The flickering steadied, not completely, but enough. 10%, holding. He could work with 10%. Izuku tore into the pack. He fought the way he'd learned to fight after mastering all the quirks, fluid, adaptive, using whatever worked in the moment. A full cowling punch cratered a wolf creature's chest. A partial black whip tendril, unstable, dissolving after 2 seconds, lashed out and clotheslined 3 smaller ones. He grabbed one by its bone mask and used it as a battering ram against 2 others, then hurled all 3 into a tree hard enough to shatter the trunk. But there were too many. Every one he killed, 2 more appeared from the forest. And his power kept glitching, spikes of 30% that made his punches delete creatures from existence, followed by drops to 5% where he could barely keep up with their speed. A big one, bear-sized, armored in bone plates, blindsided him. Its paw caught his ribs and sent him flying sideways into a tree. He felt the cracked ribs shift. Something inside him ground against something else and the pain was blinding. He hit the ground. The bear creature reared up over him, jaws opening. A red blur streaked across his vision. The creature's head separated from its body in a spray of black smoke. Something fast, impossibly fast, had cut through its neck in a single clean arc. Izuku caught a flash of red fabric and silver metal. A girl landed in front of him. Short. Red hood and cape. Black combat dress. And she was holding the most impractical, oversized, beautiful weapon he'd ever seen, a massive mechanical scythe that was also, somehow, a high-caliber sniper rifle. She had it unfolded to full scythe mode, the blade still smoking with dissolved grim matter. She spun to face the remaining creatures and Izuku watched her move. Fast. Not Ida fast, different. She practically teleported between positions, leaving trails of rose petals in her wake. She was using her speed semblance in bursts, appearing behind one creature, bisecting it, vanishing, reappearing above another, driving the scythe through its spine. Each movement was precise and practiced and absolutely lethal. But she was outnumbered too. Izuku got up. His ribs screamed. He ignored them. 1 for all flickered to 12% and he decided that was enough. He threw himself back into the fight, and something clicked. The girl was fast but linear, she attacked in straight lines, using speed to compensate for the scythe's wide swing arc. Izuku was slower but three-dimensional, he could change direction mid-movement, attack from angles that didn't make physical sense. When she drove a group of creatures toward him with a sweeping slash, he was already there, meeting them with a barrage of kicks that sent the survivor stumbling back into her kill zone. When a cluster of the creatures tried to flank her from behind, he shot a partial black whip tendril, 3 seconds of stability, just enough, and yanked them off their feet so she could scythe through them on the return swing. They'd never met. Never trained together. Never even spoken. They fought like they'd been doing this for years. 3 minutes. Every creature dead or dissolved. The forest fell silent except for their breathing, his ragged and pained, hers quick and excited. The girl collapsed her weapon into a compact form and holstered it on her back. She turned to face him. Silver eyes, striking, unusual, practically glowing in the forest light. That, she said, grinning so hard it looked like her face might split, was awesome. Izuku blinked at her. Then he coughed, tasted blood, and sat down heavily on a fallen log. Hey, are you okay? She was at his side in a burst of petals, crouching next to him, hands hovering over his ribs like she wanted to help but didn't know how. You're bleeding. Like, a lot. Your arms look really bad. What happened to you? Did you fall from, oh my god, was that your crater back there? You fell from the sky. Yeah, Izuku said. How? Long story. He pressed his hand against his ribs and One for All pulsed weakly, the regenerative aspect of the quirk working overtime but struggling with the dimensional interference. Where am I? She stared at him. You don't know where you are. I don't know what planet I'm on. The girl's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. You're on Remnant. In the Emerald Forest. Near Beacon Academy. I'm Ruby. Ruby rose. She stuck out her hand, then pulled it back when she realized his hands were covered in blood and scorch marks. Oh. Sorry. Do you need a hospital? I need about 9 things, and a hospital is one of them. Izuku tried to stand. His vision blurred. He sat back down. Ruby. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I'm from, somewhere else. Another world. He stopped. The words betrayed and experimented on and thrown away sat in his throat like broken glass. I was sent here against my will. I don't know how to get back. I'm not sure I want to. Ruby looked at him for a long moment. She wasn't processing this the way a normal person would, with disbelief, suspicion, rational objections. She was processing it the way someone who'd grown up on fairy tales and hero stories processed it. Another world. Sky fall. Monster fight. Cool powers. Okay, she said. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I believe you. Just like that. Ruby shrugged. You just fought like 30 Grimm with a dislocated shoulder and broken ribs to protect a forest full of animals and didn't even know what the Grimm were. That's not something a liar does. That's something a hero does. She stood up and offered her hand again. Come on. I'll take you to Beacon. Professor Ojban will want to meet you, and we have doctors and food and beds. Can you walk? Izuku looked at her hand. Small. Calloused from weapon use. Steady. He took it. I can walk. He could barely walk. Ruby ended up supporting half his weight for the 2-mile hike out of the deep forest, which she did without complaint despite being a full head shorter than him and maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. She talked the entire time. He learned a lot. Remnant. 4 kingdoms. Creatures of Grimm, the black wolf things and their variants. Huntsmen and huntresses, warriors trained to fight them. Beacon Academy, one of 4 schools that trained huntsmen. Aura, the manifestation of one's soul as a defensive force field and power source. Semblances, unique abilities generated by aura, personal to each individual. Dust, crystallized elemental energy used as ammunition and fuel. He absorbed it all. His brain was doing the thing it always did, building a model, fitting pieces together, looking for patterns and applications. Aura was similar to quirk energy but external rather than internal. Semblances were roughly analogous to quirks but manifested differently. Dust was an energy source his world had no equivalent for. And One for All was reacting to all of it. He could feel the quirk interfacing with the ambient energy in the air. What RWBY called aura was everywhere, diffuse, and One for All was drinking it in. Stockpiling it. The flickering was getting less frequent. His ribs were healing faster than they should. Your aura's unlocked, RWBY said suddenly, staring at him. It just did it on its own. Most people need someone else to activate it for them. Your body's generating it independently. Green light shimmered across Izuku's skin. It felt warm. Protective. Different from One for All but compatible with it, two systems recognizing each other and shaking hands. That's new, Izuku said. Your semblance is the green lightning stuff. Something like it. He wasn't ready to explain One for All. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They broke through the tree line and he saw Beacon Academy for the first time. A castle. An actual castle with towers and spires and architecture that looked like someone had built a European fortress and then given it to an anime art director to finish. Beautiful, impractical, enormous. RWBY led him through the front gates. Students turned to stare. A blood-covered guy in shredded clothes crackling with green energy wasn't exactly standard campus fare. RWBY waved at a few of them with her free hand while keeping Izuku propped up with the other. RWBY. What the, who is that? A blonde guy in armor jogged over, looking alarmed. John, this is Izuku, he's from another world, he fell from the sky, we fought grim together, it was amazing, he needs a doctor. RWBY said all of this without pausing for breath. The blonde guy, John, opened his mouth, decided not to ask follow-up questions, and pointed toward a building. Infirmary's that way. I know where it is, John. You walked past it. You're heading toward the cafeteria. RWBY turned around and started walking the other direction. Izuku let himself be redirected. The infirmary was clean and well-stocked. A nurse with a perpetually worried expression took one look at Izuku and started working on him without asking questions. Ribs taped. Burns treated. Shoulder checked. She noted, out loud, with confusion, that his aura regeneration was accelerating his healing at roughly 4 times the normal rate. Izuku filed that information away. RWBY sat in the visitor chair and didn't leave. She pulled out her scroll, a device that was basically a smartphone, and started texting rapidly. Telling my team, she said. They're gonna freak. Your team. Team RWBY. Me, Weiss, Blake, and Yang. Yang's my sister. You have a sister on your team. Half-sister, technically. Same dad, different moms. She's a 4th year and I skipped 2 years to get here early, so we ended up in the same cycle. It's a whole thing. RWBY looked up from her scroll. She's going to want to fight you. Why? Because you're strong and she fights strong people. It's like her whole deal. Izuku leaned back against the infirmary pillow. His body was healing. One for All was stabilizing. The aura integration was smoothing out the glitches. He could feel his power settling into something new, not the same as before, but functional. Maybe more than functional. RWBY, he said. Yeah. Thank you. For believing me. And for the help in the forest. She smiled. It was the most genuine thing he'd seen in a long time. You're welcome. Besides, anyone who fights that hard for no reason other than, things were in danger, is good in my book. The infirmary door opened. An older man walked in. Silver hair, dark green suit, small glasses perched on his nose. He carried a coffee mug in one hand and a cane in the other. Everything about him projected calm, measured authority, headmaster energy. But Izuku's danger sense pinged. Not hard, not a threat. More like a warning. This person is not what he appears to be. Miss Rose, the man said. I see you've brought me a guest. Professor Ojban. This is Izuku. He's from another world, yes. I felt his arrival. Ojban's grip tightened on his cane. Izuku noticed. The energy signature of his landing was detectable from my office. It was unlike anything in my considerable experience. Ojban pulled a chair to Izuku's bedside and sat with the careful deliberateness of a man who was used to controlling every room he entered. Mr. Midoriya. I am Professor Ojban, headmaster of Beacon Academy. I would very much like to understand how you came to be in my forest, what abilities you possess, and what your intentions are on Remnant. Izuku studied him. The calm mask. The probing eyes. The way he held his cane, not for support but for comfort. Habit. Like a weapon he'd carried so long it was part of his body. I'll answer your questions, Izuku said. After you answer mine. Ojban's eyebrow rose. You said you felt my arrival. You said the energy was unlike anything in your experience. But you don't look surprised. You look like you've been expecting something like this. So my question is, what do you actually want from me? Ruby glanced between them, sensing the tension. Ojban took a sip of coffee. Direct. I appreciate that. Very well. I want to understand if you're a threat or an asset, Mr. Midoriya. Remnant faces dangers that most of its population isn't aware of. Individuals with unusual power draw my attention because they inevitably become involved in those dangers, whether they choose to or not. And you'd prefer to be the one choosing for them. Ojban's expression didn't change. I'd prefer to guide them toward choices that serve the greater good. Right. Izuku sat up despite the nurse's protests. Here's what I'll tell you. I'm from a world without grim, without dust, without aura. I had abilities there. I still have them, plus whatever your world is adding to the mix. I didn't come here by choice, and I don't have a way back. I'm not interested in being an asset, a weapon, a student, or a pawn. I'll cooperate with you because you run this school and I need access to information. But I'm not yours to deploy. Silence. Ojban smiled. It was a careful smile, calculated. You remind me of someone I knew a very long time ago. Someone who believed that strength and conviction were sufficient to change the world. Were they? For a time. Then the world changed them instead. Ojban stood. You're welcome to stay at Beacon as a guest. I'll arrange quarters and access to our library and training facilities. In return, I ask only that you don't harm my students and that you come to me before taking any actions that might affect the kingdoms. I'll agree to the first part. Ojban's smile thinned. He turned and walked out. Ruby let out a breath she'd been holding. That was intense. You just told the most powerful academic on the continent to back off. Is he used to people doing that? Literally no one does that. Then it's good I started. Ruby laughed. It was bright and surprised and real, and Izuku felt something in his chest not just slightly. He couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, the aura regeneration had knocked out most of that. Not because of the unfamiliar bed or the strange world or the two moons hanging outside his window. Because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Bakugo's hand reaching for him. And Todoroki's guilt. And All Might's absence. Izuku got up at 2 in the morning and went looking for the training facilities. Beacon's combat arena was impressive, reinforced floors, adjustable terrain, sensor arrays that tracked movement and energy output. All empty at this hour. Perfect. He stood in the center of the arena and activated One for All. Green lightning crawled across his body. He held at 5%. Stable. Good. He ramped up. 10. 15. 20. At 25%, the aura integration kicked in and something shifted. The green lightning turned brighter, denser, and a translucent green shimmer layered over his skin, his aura manifesting in sync with the quirk. The combined output was more than either system alone. He threw a punch at the air. The shockwave cracked the training floor. That was way above 25% output, he muttered, staring at his fist. The aura is multiplying it. He tested each quirk systematically. Black Whip, functional, stronger than before, now leaving green and black energy trails that lingered in the air. Float, operational, smoother than his world's version, like the aura reduced the energy cost. Smokescreen, evolved, instead of dark fog, it produced an energy disruption field that scrambled sensor readings. Danger Sense, hyperactive, feeding him data about every living thing within a 200-yard radius. FA Gene was the interesting one. The kinetic energy stockpiling quirk had always stored force from repeated movements. Here, it was storing something additional, ambient energy from the atmosphere. Remnant's air was saturated with energy his world didn't have. FA Gene was drinking it constantly, building a reserve he hadn't charged. And the stockpiling core of one for all itself, the original quirk, the one that accumulated power across generations, was growing. Not slowly, the way it had been passed down from wielder to wielder over decades. Fast. Like the dimensional crossing had cracked open a dam and energy was pouring through. Izuku ran through combat forms. Full cowling combinations. Shoot-style kicks. Black Whip grapples into FA Gene-boosted strikes. He was faster, hit harder, and recovered quicker than he ever had. The Betrayal had tried to break him. The dimensional crossing had tried to kill him. Instead, they'd set him loose in a world that was making him stronger by the hour. He was in the middle of a 40-hit combination when Danger Sense flared. Someone was watching him. Had been for about 30 seconds, they were good at masking their presence. Izuku caught his last punch mid-swing and turned toward the arena entrance. A girl leaned against the doorframe. Tall. Blonde. Built like a fighter, shoulders, arms, core all developed for combat. Lilac eyes that were currently fixed on him with an intensity that was part assessment and part something else. She wore a brown jacket over a yellow tank top and had gauntlets on her wrists that Izuku's analytical brain immediately identified as weapons, shotgun mechanisms, judging by the shell casings visible in the chambers. "You're young," Izuku said. "And you're the guy who fell from the sky and fought 30 Beowulfs with his bare hands." She pushed off the doorframe and walked into the arena. Her stride was confident, rolling, a fighter's walk. "Ruby won't shut up about you. Says you fight like nothing she's ever seen. Ruby's generous. Ruby's honest. She doesn't exaggerate, she's physically incapable of it." Yang stopped 10 feet away and cracked her knuckles. "So. I heard you're strong. I'm healing. You're in the training arena at 2 a.m. throwing punches that crack reinforced concrete." "Fair point." Yang grinned. It was sharp and challenging and alive. "Fight me." "Yang, 1 round. I won't go all out and you won't go all out and we see what happens. I need to know what you're about, Sky Boy. My baby sister dragged you into our school and she clearly already likes you, so I need to figure out if you're worth the trouble." Izuku studied her. She was bouncing slightly on her toes, weight forward, fists up but loose. She meant it. This wasn't aggression, this was how Yang Xiaolong made friends. 1 round, he said. Yang's grin widened. She shifted into a boxing stance and her gauntlets clicked as she chambered rounds. She came in fast. Faster than he expected, she had speed to match her power, closing the distance in 2 strides and throwing a right cross that had her whole body behind it. The gauntlet added a shotgun blast to the impact, propelling her fist forward with explosive force. Izuku read the punch. His body was operating at 15%, enough to keep up with her speed, not enough to overpower her. He slipped left, letting her fist pass his chin by 2 inches. He felt the heat of the shotgun blast against his cheek. Yang's eyes widened. Nobody dodged her first punch. She recovered fast, spinning into a left hook, then a straight jab, then a knee strike. Combo fighter. She chained attacks together with barely any gap between them, each one augmented by the gauntlet shotguns. The arena floor cracked under her footwork. Izuku didn't hit back. He dodged, deflected, redirected. He was reading her, building a model of her fighting style the way he'd done with every opponent since childhood. She favored power over precision. She led with her right. Her defense dropped slightly when she committed to a combo. And she was getting stronger. Each punch he redirected, each kick he blocked, she came back harder. He could feel it, her energy output was climbing. Not gradually. Multiplicatively. She was absorbing kinetic energy and feeding it back into her attacks. Her semblance. She got stronger from being hit. Interesting, Izuku said, sidestepping a haymaker that left a dent in the arena wall behind him. Stop dodging and hit me already. Yang laughed. She was having fun. Her eyes flickered from lilac to red for a split second. You sure about that? I can take it. Izuku stepped inside her next punch. Close range, her power zone, technically, but also the zone where his precision mattered most. He caught her right cross at the wrist, redirected it downward, and used her own momentum to spin her off balance. While she was turning, he placed his palm on her back, gently, barely any force, and pushed. It was a 5% push. Maybe 3. Just enough to send her stumbling forward 2 steps. Yang caught herself, spun, and stared at him. Did you just pat me? You wanted me to hit you so your semblance could charge up. I declined. That's not, you can't just, your fighting style is built around absorbing damage and returning it harder. It's powerful but exploitable. If someone refuses to feed your semblance and focuses on redirection instead of force, you have to generate all your power internally. Which you can do, but it's slower and less efficient. Yang stared at him. Her eyes were fully red now, but not with anger. With something more complicated. You analyzed my entire fighting style in 30 seconds, she said. Closer to 20. She burst out laughing. Full, genuine, head-thrown-back laughter that echoed in the empty arena. Oh my God, Ruby was right. You're insane. She deactivated her gauntlets and walked toward him, still grinning. Okay, Sky Boy. You passed the test. I didn't know I was being tested. You were. Rule 1 of the Xiaolong family, you learn everything you need to know about a person by fighting them. Yang extended her fist. You fight careful. You fight smart. You didn't try to hurt me even though you definitely could have. That tells me more than any conversation. Izuku bumped her fist with his. Welcome to Beacon, I guess, Yang said. Fair warning, I'm going to want a rematch. A real one. Anytime. Yang headed for the exit, then paused. Hey, Izuku. Yeah. Ruby's special. Like, genuinely, world-changingly special. If you hurt her, I won't need my semblance to break you. Noted. Yang threw him a lazy 2-fingered salute and disappeared into the hallway. Izuku stood alone in the cracked arena. His hands were steady. His power was stable. And for the first time since the restraint table, he felt something other than hollow grief. He felt ready. The next morning, news hit Beacon about a White Fang attack on an SDC transport convoy 3 hours outside Vale. 12 cargo vehicles carrying refined dust, escorted by SDC private security, ambushed on the highway. Workers trapped in the crossfire, both human and faunus laborers who'd been riding in the transport vehicles because the SDC was too cheap to provide separate transit. Ojban dispatched Team RWBY as a rapid response training mission. Assess and support local authorities, he said during the briefing. Do not engage White Fang forces directly unless civilian lives are at immediate risk. Izuku wasn't invited. He went anyway. He didn't follow Team RWBY's bullhead, he ran. Full cowling at 30%, augmented by aura, covering ground faster than the airship at low altitude. He arrived at the convoy site 6 minutes before the team did. The scene was bad. SDC transport trucks jackknifed it across the highway. Refined dust crates scattered everywhere, explosive, volatile, one stray bullet away from turning the whole area into a blast zone. White Fang soldiers in grim masks had the convoy surrounded. SDC security forces were dug in behind the trucks, returning fire. And caught between them, 40-odd workers. Human and faunus, huddled together behind whatever cover they could find. Some were injured. None were armed. Izuku assessed the situation from a ridge overlooking the highway. The SDC security wasn't trying to protect the workers, they were using the workers' position as a human shield to protect the dust cargo. The White Fang wasn't trying to free the faunus workers, they were trying to steal the dust and didn't care who got caught in the crossfire. Both sides were wrong. Both sides were willing to let innocent people die for their objectives. Izuku dropped from the ridge. He hit the highway at 30% and moved. First, the workers. He reached them in 2 seconds, black whip tendrils extending from both hands, forming a barrier cage around the cluster of huddled civilians. The tendrils weren't perfect, still glitchy, occasionally flickering, but they held. Bullets from both sides pinged off the whip barrier and ricocheted away. A faunus woman with fox ears clutched a bleeding human man to her chest and stared up at Izuku with wide eyes. Stay down. Stay together. This ends in 60 seconds. He left the barrier standing. Black Whip was stable enough now to maintain a construct without his direct attention for about 90 seconds. Then he turned toward the SDC security forces. They saw him coming. A guy in combat armor raised his rifle. Halt. This is SDC jurisdiction, Izuku took the rifle out of his hand so fast the soldier didn't register the movement until he was holding empty air. Izuku crushed the rifle, dropped it, and moved to the next soldier. And the next. And the next. 12 SDC security personnel, disarmed in 8 seconds. Not hurt, disarmed. Weapons broken. Communication equipment shorted out by a targeted burst of green lightning. Stay with the civilians, Izuku told the shell-shocked security captain. If you draw another weapon, I'll break it and the arm holding it. Then the White Fang. They'd seen what he did to the SDC forces and they were already repositioning. 23 fighters, well-armed, well-trained. Their leader, a tall woman with antlers and a lieutenant's mask, was shouting orders into a radio. Izuku closed the distance. Full cowling at 35%. The highway cracked under his footsteps. The first volley of gunfire hit his aura and scattered. He didn't slow down. He reached the first line of White Fang soldiers and started dismantling them. Not killing. Dismantling. Weapons broken. Auras shattered with precisely calculated strikes. Communication equipment destroyed. He moved through them systematically, analytically, like he was solving a puzzle rather than fighting a battle. Each strike was exactly as hard as it needed to be to remove a combatant from the fight and not a newton harder. The lieutenant with antlers came at him with a chainsaw sword. She was skilled, huntress-trained, if Izuku had to guess. Her aura was strong and her technique was polished. He let her swing 3 times, read her pattern, and then caught the chainsaw sword between 2 fingers augmented with one for all. The blade ground against his reinforced skin and threw sparks but didn't cut. "This is over," he said. "Take your people and leave. The dust stays, but I'm not going to let the SDC use it either. It gets distributed to the settlements along this route that actually need it." The lieutenant stared at him. "You're not SDC?" "No." "Not military?" "No." "Then who the hell are you?" "Someone who's tired of watching people with power use it on people without." He let go of her sword. She stumbled back, reassessed, and made the smart call. She signaled retreat. The white fang melted into the tree line. Izuku turned around. Team RWBY's bullhead was landing on the highway. The ramp dropped. Ruby came out first, crescent rows deployed, scanning for threats. Behind her, Yang, ready for a fight. A girl in white with a rapier, expression frozen somewhere between shock and confusion. And a girl in black with a bow on her head, standing at the bottom of the ramp and not moving at all. Ruby saw the scene, disarmed SDC soldiers, unconscious White Fang fighters, protected civilians, and lowered her weapon. "You beat us here," she said. "I run fast. You, Izuku, we were supposed to handle this. Ojban sent us. The workers were in the crossfire. I didn't have time to wait." Ruby processed this, then nodded. She couldn't argue with the result. The girl in white, Weiss, had to be Weiss Schnee based on the SDC crest on her jacket, walked past Ruby toward the workers. She was looking at the scene with an expression Izuku recognized. It was the face of someone watching their worldview fracture in real time. The SDC security forces. Her family's employees. Using workers as shields. Weiss knelt beside the injured human man the faunus woman was still holding. "Are you alright? What happened?" "We were in the trucks," the man said, voice shaking. "When the attack started, the guards pulled back behind us. Used us as cover. We couldn't move, the dust was everywhere, one spark and we'd all." Weiss's hand tightened on Mertenaster's hilt. She stood. Turned to the SDC security captain. Her voice was arctic. "You use civilian laborers as a defensive barrier to protect cargo?" The captain straightened. "Miss Schnee, standard operating procedure dictates, standard operating procedure is going to be rewritten, and you're going to be unemployed. Give me your identification number." The captain's face went white. He stuttered out a number. Weiss typed it into her scroll with the precision of someone who had been signing corporate documents since she was 12. Then she turned to Izuku. Her eyes were ice blue and sharp and assessing, and underneath the assessment, genuinely shaken. "You stopped both sides," she said. "You didn't pick one. Neither side was right. The White Fang attacked a legal transport. The transport was staffed with laborers being used as living shields and carrying cargo that's being sold at prices that keep frontier settlements dependent on SDC supply lines. The White Fang attacked it because your father's company profits from faunus exploitation. Neither of those things justify putting 40 people in a crossfire." Weiss opened her mouth. Closed it. She looked at the workers, human and faunus together, helping each other up, checking each other's injuries. The faunus woman with fox ears was bandaging the human man's arm with a strip of her own clothing. "You're right," Weiss said quietly. "Neither does." She walked back to the bullhead without another word. The girl in black, Blake, hadn't moved from the ramp. She'd watched the entire thing. Izuku met her eyes. Amber, intense, unreadable. She had a bow on her head that Izuku's enhanced senses told him was hiding something. The fabric moved slightly in the wind in a way that suggested ears underneath, not hair. She was faunus. Disguised. Standing with a team that included a Schnee. And she'd just watched a stranger refuse to take sides in a conflict she'd been living inside her entire life. Blake held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she turned and went back into the bullhead. Izuku spent the next 2 hours organizing the redistribution of the dust cargo to nearby settlements. Ruby helped. Yang helped. Weiss made calls to SDC branch offices and shut down every objection with the sheer force of her last name and her fury. Blake watched from a distance, saying nothing, but she carried crates when asked. By the time they finished, the sun was setting. The workers had been transported to the nearest settlement for medical care. The highway was clear. On the bullhead ride back to Beacon, Ruby sat next to Izuku. You're not going to stay at Beacon, are you? She said. Not a question. Izuku looked out the window at the passing landscape. Forests, mountains, the distant gleam of Vale's city lights. A world that was broken in different ways than his old one but broken all the same. Grim outside the walls. Corruption inside them. People caught between, surviving but never safe. No, he said. I'm going to build something. Somewhere between the kingdoms, where the people are who nobody protects. That's insane. Probably. You'll need help. He looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, jaw set, silver eyes bright. Ruby, I became a huntress to help people. Not to follow orders from a headmaster who I'm starting to think has been lying about a lot of things. If you're going to build something real, I want in. Your team, my team can make their own choices. I'm making mine. Izuku turned back to the window. His reflection stared back, bruised, burned, battered, and more certain of his next move than he'd been about anything in his life. Okay, he said. Behind them in the bullhead, Yang listened from 2 seats back and said nothing. She'd already made her decision too. She just needed a little more time before she said it out loud. Weiss sat in the front row, scrolling through SDC internal documents on her scroll, building a file she'd never be able to unsee. The company her family built was rotten. She'd known it. She'd always known it. But knowing it and seeing workers used as human shields were different things. Something inside her was rearranging itself around a new center of gravity, and that center had green lightning and a flat refusal to accept things as they were. Blake sat in the back corner, bow twitching, watching the boy from another world with an expression that nobody could read. In her pocket, her scroll held 3 unread messages from White Fang contacts asking where she'd been. She didn't answer them. For the first time in years, she'd seen someone attack the system itself instead of choosing a side within it. She didn't know what to do with that yet. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. Izuku returned to his guest quarters at Beacon to find a message on his scroll. Ruby had set one up for him. The message was from Ojban. I watched the convoy footage. Impressive. And concerning. I'd like to discuss the political implications of a foreign national redistributing SDC resources without authorization. At your convenience, of course. Oh. Izuku typed back, the political implication is that 40 people are alive and fed. If that's a problem, the politics need fixing, not me. He set the scroll down and walked to the window. The 2 moons hung over Beacon. The campus was quiet. His body had healed almost completely, aura regeneration combined with One for All's reinforcement was absurdly effective. He thought about what he'd told Ruby. Building something. A place for the people the kingdoms forgot. He'd need resources, infrastructure, defensible terrain. He'd need to understand the political landscape far better than he currently did. He'd need allies. He'd need to be something he'd never been before. Not a hero. Heroes worked within systems. Systems betrayed you. Not a villain. Villains destroyed without building. Something new. Something that couldn't be co-opted or corrupted or taken away. Something his. His scroll buzzed again. This time, not a message. An alert. Ruby had added him to a group chat labeled Team RWBY plus Skyboy. Ruby, so Izuku's leaving Beacon to build a settlement in the wilds and I'm going with him. Yang. What Yang? Ruby, we just talked about this. Ruby, we didn't actually. Yang, I mean I was going to talk about it. Weiss, is this about the convoy? Because I have concerns about the SDC's operational protocols that I need to. Yang, Weiss, not everything is about your dad's company. Weiss, it's not about my father, it's about systemic exploitation of Blake. She's right. Yang, Blake. You haven't said 10 words all semester and this is what makes you type. Blake, he didn't pick a side. He picked the people. That matters. Ruby, see Yang, I hate this team. Yang, when are we leaving? Ruby, wait, you're coming. Young, obviously I'm coming, I'm not letting my baby sister run off into the wilderness with a guy she met yesterday. Young, no offense. Izuku stared at the screen. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. He typed, no offense taken. And thank you. Ruby, laughing face, laughing face, laughing face. Weiss, I need to make some arrangements first. Financial and otherwise. Give me a week. Blake, I need to handle something too. I'll find you when I'm ready. Izuku set the scroll down. 4 people. For strangers from a world he'd been in for less than 48 hours, ready to follow him into the unknown because of what they'd seen him do. He'd spent years earning the trust of his classmates in his own world. Building relationships. Proving himself over and over. And they'd strapped him to a table. These people had watched him fight. Watched him choose. Watched him refuse to accept the way things were. And they'd chosen him back. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass of the window. One for all hummed inside him, steady, growing, hungry for whatever came next. Far to the north, in a domain of darkness and grim, Salem watched through the eyes of a seer grim she'd positioned high above the emerald forest. The dimensional rift's energy signature still pulsed in her senses, something from outside the brothers' creation, something that didn't obey their rules. She'd been alive for thousands of years. She'd waged war against Ojpin across centuries. She'd commanded grim armies and destroyed kingdoms and endured a curse that should have driven her insane. She was bored. She'd been bored for so long that boredom itself had become a kind of pain. This boy from nowhere, this anomaly who fought like a god and talked to Ojpin like an equal and redistributed a Schnee convoy like he owned the continent, he was the most interesting thing she'd seen in a very, very long time. Salem leaned forward on her throne. The seer grim's feed showed Izuku standing at his window, forehead against the glass, green lightning crawling across his shoulders. Find out everything about him, she told Watts, who stood in the shadows behind her throne. And clear my schedule. I may need to introduce myself. In the deepest part of the emerald forest, where Izuku's crater still smoked, something pulsed. The dimensional rift he'd torn through was closing, but not completely. A hairline crack remained, invisible to normal senses but radiating energy that resonated with Remnant's core. The dust deposits in the surrounding earth were crystallizing in new patterns. The trees closest to the crater were growing faster, their bark shifting from red to green. And deep underground, in caverns that hadn't been disturbed since the gods walked Remnant, the relic of choice hummed in its vault beneath Beacon. It had felt the anomaly arrive. It knew what he was, something from outside the system, carrying power that didn't belong to this world's rules. The relic didn't think, exactly. It wasn't sentient in any way a human would recognize. But if it could have formed an opinion, it would have been something close to anticipation. The game was changing. The pieces were moving. And for the first time in millennia, there was a player on the board who hadn't been placed there by the brothers. Everything that followed would be different. Chapter 2, Kingdom Come. 3 months was enough time to build walls. Not metaphorically, actual walls. 12 feet of reinforced concrete mixed with processed dust crystals that made the surface harder than steel, running a perimeter of half a mile around what used to be an abandoned mining settlement in the no-man's land between Vale's eastern border and the Vacuo Badlands. The settlement had been empty for 6 years, grim pressure from the east had pushed everyone out. Nobody from the kingdoms had bothered to reclaim it because nobody from the kingdoms cared about land that didn't generate tax revenue. Izuku had cared. He'd spent the first week alone, clearing grim nests in a 15-mile radius. Systematic. Starting from the settlement outward, working in concentric circles, dismantling every nest he found and killing every grim he encountered. By the end of week 1, the immediate area was clean. By week 3, it had been clean long enough that the ambient fear and negativity saturating the land started to dissipate, and when the emotional charge that attracted grim faded, they stopped coming back. Week 4, the first refugees showed up. A family of 7, 2 parents, 5 kids, faunus all of them, cat ears and rabbit ears and one little girl with a lizard tail who stared at Izuku's green lightning with enormous eyes. They'd been walking for 11 days from a settlement that the White Fang had abandoned mid-protection after a leadership dispute. Izuku fed them, gave them shelter in one of the mining buildings he'd repaired, and went back to building walls. By month 2, there were 300 people. By month 3, 800. Word spread the way it always spreads among people who have nothing, through whisper networks, through refugee caravans, through the kind of desperate hope that makes people walk across Badlands because someone told them there was a place where the walls held. They called the settlement New Haven first. Then the media got hold of it, Vale's news networks, initially dismissive, then increasingly unable to ignore the data. Grim incursions in the region down 90%. A functioning water reclamation system. A medical clinic staffed by a former Beacon student who dropped out and had nowhere else to go. A food production setup using hydroponic techniques Izuku had designed by adapting agricultural science from his world to remnant soil composition. The media called it the sovereign territory. Not because Izuku declared anything, because the people living there did. He was in the middle of reviewing water distribution schematics when Ruby's hand reached over his shoulder, grabbed the stylus, and circled something on the diagram. "You've got a bottleneck here," she said, leaning over him, her hair brushing his cheek. "The pipe diameter drops at the junction point. Under high demand you're going to get pressure loss in sectors 4 and 6. Izuku looked at the circle. She was right. He'd missed it, he'd been awake for 31 hours and his eyes had stopped catching fine details around hour 25. Good catch. You need to sleep. I'll sleep when the Phase 2 housing is framed. The housing is framed. I framed it. John's team finished the roofing yesterday. He looked up. Through the window of the planning building, he could see the new housing block, 20 units, basic but solid, with actual beds and heating and walls that didn't leak. "Oh," he said. "Sleep," Ruby said. She took the schematics out of his hands, set them on the desk, and sat on the edge of the table facing him. Her silver eyes were steady and serious in a way that still caught him off guard. Ruby's default mode was enthusiasm and motion, but when she turned serious, it hit like a weight. "You haven't slept properly in 4 days," she said. "You're running at 50%. And when you run at 50%, you make mistakes. And when you make mistakes out here, people get hurt. I know. So sleep." "Ruby, Izuku." She put both hands on his face. Her palms were warm and calloused. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you. Because I'm your field commander and because she stopped, jaw tightening, something flashing across her face that she was still learning to say out loud. "Because I need you functional. Okay?" He looked at her for a long moment. The afternoon light came through the window and caught the red in her hair, and she was looking at him with this expression that was half exasperation and half something so genuine it was almost painful to look at directly. There was a medical supply count on his desk. A grim patrol schedule. 3 requests from settlement residents that needed personal attention. A message from Ojban he'd been deliberately ignoring. All of it could wait 20 minutes. No, 6 hours. He'd give himself 6 hours. "Okay," he said. Ruby smiled. "The full one, the sun coming out from behind clouds one." She dropped her hands and he caught one of them before she could pull back completely, and she went still. They'd been doing this for 3 weeks. Getting closer and then pulling back, circling the thing that was clearly there like neither of them was sure the other one had actually signed up for it. Izuku, because he was still, quietly, privately, wary of caring about people and having them decide he was expendable. Ruby, because she'd never been in this situation before and she processed emotions like she processed everything, fast, with too much energy and no idea what to do with the excess. "Ruby," he said. "Yeah. You don't have to frame it as a strategic necessity. If you want me to sleep because you're worried about me, you can just say that." Her face went red immediately, that sudden total blush that she couldn't control. Yeah. I'm worried. Obviously. Because you're the settlement needs, and also Izuku stood up, leaned forward, and kissed her. It was short. Just a moment. She tasted like the terrible coffee she'd been mainlining to keep up with his hours. When he pulled back she was staring at him with wide eyes and her hand had tightened in his grip. "Oh," she said. "Yeah," he said. "I was going to say it first," she said. "I had a whole thing planned." "Sorry." "No, you're not." "No, I'm not." Ruby laughed, bright and startled and real. She grabbed the front of his shirt, pulled him down, and kissed him back properly, with the whole body commitment she brought to everything she did. Then she pushed him away toward the door and said, "Sleep. Now. Sector 6 water pressure can wait." Izuku went. He was smiling. He hadn't smiled like that in a long time. The crisis with Weiss happened fast. She'd been working from within the SDC for 8 weeks, routing resources to New Haven through shell companies and dummy accounts. Compressed dust that wasn't on the official manifest. Medical equipment listed as depreciated assets. Building materials that appeared in the ledgers as disposal costs. She was meticulous, brilliant, and completely untraceable. Until she wasn't. Jacques Schnee had access to auditors that most small governments would envy. He found the discrepancies on a Tuesday morning and had Weiss in his study by noon. Izuku got the call at 2 a.m. Not from Weiss, from Whitley, her younger brother, who'd found her sister's frequency in the SDC internal directory and apparently decided that warning her associates was the least terrible option available to him. The call was 6 seconds long. "She's been caught. He's convening a board meeting at dawn to formally remove her from the inheritance. You have until then if you're going to do anything." Izuku was already moving before the call ended. He made Vale in 40 minutes, full cowling flight, skimming rooftops, avoiding the military airspace corridors by memory. The Schnee Manor in Vale's upscale district was exactly as excessive as he'd imagined: white towers, iron gates, the family crest in every visible surface. He landed on the garden wall and moved through the grounds without triggering a single security sensor, because the system's dead zones had been included in the documents Weiss had quietly forwarded to New Haven 3 weeks ago. He found her on the second-floor terrace, standing in the cold with no jacket, staring at the garden. "Whitley called you," Weiss said. "Not a question." "Yeah." She turned. Her eyes were dry, which told Izuku she'd already done the crying part. Now she was in the stage that came after, the cold, clear, burning stage. "My father has the board. The vote in the morning will formalize my removal from the inheritance structure and dissolve my access to all SDC financial instruments. Okay. I'm going to be left with nothing. My combat training, my semblance, whatever personal effects I can carry. Okay." Weiss stared at him. "Do you understand what I'm saying? The resources I've been routing to New Haven will stop. The supply chains I built will need to be replaced. We'll figure it out." Izuku moved to stand beside her at the terrace railing. "Weiss. I didn't call in a favor and fly across the continent to help you hold on to the SDC. I came because Whitley sounded scared and that meant you were probably handling something alone that you shouldn't have to handle alone." She was quiet for a moment. Below them, the garden was lit by pale moonlight, both moons out tonight, painting everything silver. "I knew this was coming," she said. "When I started diverting resources, I knew eventually he'd find it. I just thought I'd have longer to." She stopped. Controlled the breath. "I've been building leverage for months. Documents, testimony from SDC employees, financial records of his illegal contracts with the White Fang. Enough to damage him even if he comes after me. Does he know about the documents?" "Not yet." "Then you're not as cornered as he thinks you are." Weiss looked at him sideways. You have a face you make when you're planning something. You're making it. The SDC is powerful because it controls dust distribution in 3 of the 4 kingdoms. That's a structural monopoly maintained through political relationships, not because the SDC is actually the most efficient dust processor available. If those relationships were disrupted, that would take years. For someone starting from scratch, yes. You have every internal document, every supplier contract, every employee record. He turned to face her. Come to New Haven. Not as a supplier. As a leader. Head of economic infrastructure. You know more about Remnant's resource distribution than anyone alive, and you hate what that knowledge has been used for. Use it differently. Weiss stared at him for a long time. The wind pulled at her ponytail. My father will come after New Haven, she said. Once he realizes I've taken his documents, he'll come after everything I'm associated with. Let him try. She said nothing. Weiss. He held her gaze. You've been propping up a rotten structure your whole life because it had your name on it. Come build something that deserves your name. Something shifted in her expression. Not dramatically, Weiss didn't do dramatic emotion, she did controlled emotion that occasionally leaked. But her jaw unclenched, and her shoulders dropped a half-inch, and her eyes, still sharp, still calculating, went somewhere softer. I'll need 2 hours to compile the files, she said. I'll wait. You can wait in the garden. If my father finds you in the manor I'll have to explain you and I don't have the patience for that conversation tonight. Izuku went to the garden. He sat on a stone bench between 2 topiary sculptures and watched the moons and thought about supply chains and dust distribution and the specific bureaucratic weak points in Vale's trade regulation system until Weiss reappeared at the garden gate with a travel case, Mertonaster at her hip, and an expression that was the closest she got to terrified. I've never left before, she said. Not like this. Does it feel wrong? She considered. No. Then let's go. They were over the city wall before the first hints of dawn touched the sky. Weiss looked down at Vale spreading out below them. Izuku was carrying them both in a float-assisted leap, green energy wrapping around her. Her city. Her family's seat of power. Her whole life up until this moment. She looked at it for exactly 3 seconds. Then she turned forward. She didn't look back. New Haven had a problem. The problem's name was Adam Taurus, and he arrived on a Wednesday with 60 White Fang soldiers and the specific energy of someone who decided that a problem needed to be solved violently. Izuku heard about the incoming force from his perimeter scouts, former Vale military who'd found their way to New Haven after refusing orders they considered unconscionable, 40 minutes before Adam's column reached visible range. 40 minutes was enough. He got the settlement's non-combatants into the reinforced housing blocks. He positioned his militia, not perfect soldiers, but trained, motivated, and fighting for their own homes, at the wall emplacements. He put Yang on the main gate. Then he walked out the front gate alone to meet Adam Taurus. Adam stopped his column 200 yards from the walls. He was exactly what the intelligence reports had described, tall, red and black aesthetic, wilt and blush at his hip, and the coiled-tight posture of someone who'd spent so long being angry that the anger had become structural. Green Sovereign, Adam said. He made the title sound like an insult. You've been stealing my people. Your people, Izuku said. When did they become yours? The White Fang doesn't lose members to former members. People who left because they didn't want to plant bombs in civilian markets anymore. People who came here because here is better than what you were offering. Izuku stopped 20 feet from Adam. No weapons drawn, neither of them had drawn anything yet. I haven't recruited anyone from the White Fang, Adam. I just built a place worth coming to, and people chose it. You built a monument to coexistence. Adam said it like a slur. Faunus and humans, living together, pretending the last 100 years of oppression didn't happen. It's weakness disguised as progress. It's 83 Faunus families who aren't getting shot at anymore. But sure, call it weakness. Adam's hand moved to wilt. Return my people, dismantle this settlement, and submit to White Fang jurisdiction over this territory, and we leave without incident. No. The word sat between them in the morning air. There are 60 of us, Adam said. I know. I counted. Izuku tilted his head. I also know your formation puts your heaviest fighters on the left flank, which means your right flank is lightly covered, which means the 4 snipers you stationed in the tree line to the east are your actual plan B. I've already had my people relocate them. He watched Adam's eyes. There, a flicker. He'd known about the snipers. He hadn't expected them to be detected. You came here to intimidate me into compliance. When that didn't work, you were going to try the snipers. You don't actually want a full engagement, you're not equipped for it and you know it. Adam drew wilt. Let's find out what I'm equipped for. He was fast. Fast enough that most huntsmen would have eaten that first slash without seeing it coming, a diagonal draw cut aimed at Izuku's left shoulder. Izuku leaned back 3 inches and let the blade pass his chin. Adam's semblance activated immediately, moon slice, the absorption and release of kinetic energy. The first slash had been feeding it. He flowed into a second cut, a third, each one building the charge. The air around his sword began to glow red. Izuku let him build it. He retreated, controlling the distance, drawing Adam forward. Each slash absorbed and stored, the attacks were getting faster, the charge building. Adam's eyes were intent, predatory, calculating the moment he could release everything in a single devastating discharge that no aura shield would survive. There. The tell. A microscopic hitch in his footwork, half a second before release. Izuku's danger sense screamed. He moved, not back, forward. Inside the discharge arc. He felt the energy release scorch the air inches from his back as he stepped inside Adam's guard. No room to swing now. No room to discharge. Adam's eyes went wide. Izuku hit him with a 35% FA gene release. He'd been stockpiling kinetic energy for 30 seconds of movement, every step, every dodge, stored in FA Jin's reserves. He released it all through a single palm strike to Adam's chest. The impact didn't look dramatic. No explosion, no flash of light. Adam just launched backward through the air like he'd been hit by a car, leaving a trench in the dirt when he landed 60 feet back. His aura shattered on impact. He lay in the trench, gasping, staring at the sky. His 60 soldiers hadn't moved. They were watching. Calculating. Izuku walked toward Adam. Slow. No aggression. He stopped at the edge of the trench and looked down. That was your semblance, your best technique, and a planned ambush, Izuku said. And you're in a hole. Adam's face was a mess of fury and pain and humiliation. Kill me, he said through his teeth. If you're going to beat me, finish it. I'm not going to kill you. Don't be weak, killing you would turn you into a martyr and make your followers angrier. Letting you walk away defeated makes you a symbol of failure, which is so much worse for your cause than death. Izuku crouched at the edge of the trench. Go home, Adam. Lick your wounds. Think about why a former Faunus liberation fighter is trying to destroy a place where Faunus are living safely. Ask yourself who that actually serves. He straightened and turned back toward New Haven. This isn't over, Adam said. It is for today. The white fan column melted away into the tree line. Not broken, retreating on Adam's order, which meant their discipline was better than their leadership deserved. Izuku watched them go. His danger sense tracked them until they were 3 miles out. Inside the gate, Yang was leaning against the wall with her arms crossed and an impressed expression. You talked him down by punching him into a ditch. Punching him into a ditch and then talking, yeah. Same energy. He'll be back, Izuku said. Not with 60. With allies. Yang pushed off the wall. Then we'll be ready. That's generally the plan. She fell into step beside him as he walked back into the settlement. They moved through the morning market, vendors who'd started operating spontaneously in the open space between the housing blocks and the clinic, trading food and goods and services. A human woman haggling with a faunus man over the price of reclaimed metal. 3 kids, 2 human, 1 with rabbit ears, chasing each other between the market stalls. It's real, Yang said, quietly, watching the kids. Yeah. I keep expecting it to fall apart. That's my default, expect good things to fall apart. Izuku glanced at her. She was looking at the market with an expression she usually kept pointed away from people. Unguarded. A little raw. The walls hold, he said. I check them every morning. I know. I come with you sometimes. You don't notice because you're half asleep and thinking about schematics. He had noticed. He just hadn't said anything. Yang. What's going on? She shrugged. It was a very deliberate shrug, the kind that meant the opposite of casual. Nothing. Big nothing. Totally fine. Your left eye went red twice during the Adam situation even though you weren't fighting. She stopped walking. I'm not good at, she stopped again. Started over. My mom left when I was a baby. Ruby's mom died when she was little. I spent a long time finding fights because fights are simple, someone hits you, you hit back, it ends. Staying is harder than fighting. Izuku waited. I came here for Ruby, Yang said. That's what I told myself. But that's not, she exhaled. Looked at him. Direct, because Yang didn't do indirect. You make me want to stay. Not for Ruby. For me. And that scares the hell out of me because people who make me want to stay usually leave, Izuku said. Yeah. I was thrown out of my world against my will, Izuku said. The dimensional rift closed behind me. I couldn't go back if I wanted to. I'm not going anywhere, Yang. She stared at him. Then she grabbed the front of his jacket, not aggressive, just holding on, and kissed him hard enough that he took a step back. When she let go, she was breathing slightly faster and her eyes were very definitely red. Okay, she said. Good. Are we? Don't make it weird. And don't tell Ruby I kissed you first or she'll never let me live it down. She already knows I kissed her first. Then at least I'm second and not third. Yang glanced over her shoulder to make sure nobody was watching. 3 children were, openly, and promptly bolted laughing into the market. Yang turned back, expression caught between mortified and amused. Whatever. Come on. You need to eat something before the next crisis. When is the next crisis? By my estimate. About 4 hours. She was off by 40 minutes. Blake had been in New Haven for 3 weeks before she introduced herself. Izuku had known she was there since day 2, Danger Sense didn't miss someone cycling through the settlement's edges at consistent intervals, and Remnant's enhanced aura signatures were as distinct as fingerprints once he'd learned to read them. He could have called her out at any point. He waited. She'd come to him when she was ready. She came on a Thursday, in the middle of a tense community meeting about integration. 3 former White Fang members who'd joined the settlement were having serious friction with a group of human residents who'd lost family in WF attacks. Izuku was mediating, which mostly involved letting people be angry and then asking questions that reframed what the anger was actually about. Blake walked in partway through and sat in the back corner. Her bow was still on. She listened. When the meeting concluded, not resolved, but calmer, with a structure for ongoing dialogue established, she was still there as people filtered out. Izuku collected the chairs. You were there, he said, without turning. At the convoy. White Fang Lieutenant. I wasn't a lieutenant, Blake said. I was, it doesn't matter what rank I was. He turned. She was standing straight, arms at her sides, chin level. prepared for confrontation. He set down the chairs he was holding and pulled one out for her, then one for himself. "Sit," he said. "I'm not interested in arresting you." She sat. Carefully, the way people sit when they're ready to bolt. "How long have you known I was here?" she asked. 18 days. Her jaw tightened. "And you didn't do anything. You weren't hurting anyone. You were watching. I respect that." He leaned his elbows on his knees. "What were you watching for?" Blake looked at the meeting room's empty chairs. "Whether you were real. Whether New Haven was real. Both. And..." She was quiet for a moment. "I was born into the White Fang. I believed in the cause. Faunus rights, equality, an end to the exploitation that's been happening since before I was born. I still believe in that. But the methods," she stopped. "There are two kinds of people in the WF. People who want a better world for Faunus and people who want to burn the world that hurt them. They overlap. They're hard to tell apart until someone gives the order that you can't follow." "What was your order?" "Bomb a civilian passenger train to send a message to the SDC." She said it flat. No drama. Just the weight of it. "I left before I had to refuse out loud. I told myself leaving was the same as refusing." "Is it?" She met his eyes. "No." Izuku nodded. "The community integration here is a problem I haven't solved," he said. "I have former WF members and people who got hurt by WF actions in the same space, and the dialogue is bad and getting worse. I need someone who understands the WF structure, not to exploit it, but to understand what former members are carrying and help them work through it in a way that doesn't blow up the community." Blake blinked. "You're offering me a job. I'm asking if you want to do something useful with the things you know." "I was White Fang. I know. I'm Faunus. I know that too." Izuku raised his hand slightly. "And you're also the person who's been spending 3 weeks making sure this place was real before you committed to it, which tells me you have standards and you're not reckless. I can work with that." Blake stared at him. Her brow twitched, the ears underneath shifting. "Why aren't you asking about my ears?" she said. "Because you're not ready to take the bow off and I don't need you to." She was silent for a moment. "Then, I have contacts in the WF. Low-level people who want out but don't have anywhere to go. If I reach out to them through my old network, do it. It could draw attention from Adam's people. Adam and I had a conversation this morning. He's aware we're acquainted." Blake's eyes sharpened. "He attacked. He tried. He's reconsidering." Izuku stood. "Come on. I'll introduce you to the community council. You should meet everyone who's been trying to figure out the integration problem." Blake stood. She pulled the bow off. Cat ears, black with dark tips. She held his gaze while she did it, shoulders braced for some reaction. He nodded. "Ready when you are." She breathed out slowly. Something that had been rigid in her posture softened, just slightly. "Ready," she said. Ironwood's declaration arrived via official scroll message on a Friday morning, delivered to every major remnant media outlet simultaneously. Official Atlas letterhead, General Ironwood seal, formal military language that didn't quite disguise how much the content was just a very polished threat. The unauthorized settlement known as New Haven or the Sovereign Territory operates without kingdom authorization in contested territory and is therefore subject to Atlas provisional governance protocols. The individual known as Izuku Midoriya is hereby requested to present himself before the Atlas Council to establish the legal basis for his operations. Non-compliance will result in the reclassification of the settlement as an unsanctioned occupation. Weiss read it, said something in the Schnee family's private dialect that was definitely a very elegant curse, and then looked at Izuku. Izuku drafted a response that took him 11 minutes. He broadcast it on the same channels Ironwood had used, addressed to General Ironwood and anyone else paying attention. He kept it factual. Grim incursion rates in the region before New Haven, documented. After, documented. Refugee integration numbers, documented. Medical outcomes in the settlement's clinic versus the nearest kingdom-administered facility, documented. Resources spent, documented. Then a single question at the end, addressed directly to Ironwood: in the time this settlement has been operational, what has Atlas provided for the people living in this territory? He attached the data sets and sent it. The response was immediate and enormous. Within 3 hours, Vale's news networks were running the numbers. Within 6, citizens of 3 kingdoms were in comment sections arguing about Atlas overreach. Within 12, 2 Vale Council members had publicly stated that New Haven's operations appeared to be in the public interest. Ironwood did not respond directly. Instead, 3 Atlas frigates appeared in the airspace north of New Haven's territory 2 days later. They didn't come close enough to require engagement protocols. They just sat there, in perfect formation, a message that didn't need words. Ruby watched them from the observation tower on the north wall. "He's not going to attack," she said. "Not yet. He can't, the public opinion hit would be too bad. But he wants us to know he can." "He wants me nervous," Izuku said. "Are you?" "No. But I'm taking it seriously, which is not the same thing." He looked at the frigates. "He's positioning for something bigger. The public embarrassment of my response is going to push him toward escalation. He'll need to do something that can't be framed as bullying a refugee settlement. Like manufacture a pretext. Like manufacture a pretext." He pulled out his scroll. "I need to talk to our intelligence contacts. We should know what's happening in Atlas before it happens to us." Blake appeared at his elbow. She'd been developing an information network with a speed that even Izuku found impressive, using her WF contacts and a talent for reading people that had probably kept her alive through years of underground operations. "Already working on it," she said. "I have 2 people inside Atlas's logistics division who've been moving resources they can't account for through official channels. Something's being built or armed or deployed that isn't on any public record. Find out what." "I'm trying." "But," she hesitated. "There's something else. Adam's been quiet since you put him in a ditch." "Too quiet." His column retreated north, not back toward WF territory. "Someone's talking to him." "Atlas Black Ops," Izuku said. Blake nodded slowly. "If Ironwood's people are arming Adam, they're building something they can deny. Ironwood using a Faunus Liberation Group as a proxy attack force," Weiss said, from across the room where she'd been reviewing supply manifests. Her voice was ice. "My father would call that pragmatic." "Your father and Ironwood are more alike than either of them would admit," Ruby said. Weiss didn't disagree. That alone said something. Izuku stood at the planning table, looking at the map of New Haven's territory and the surrounding region. The Atlas frigates to the north. White Fang movement northeast. The fragile supply routes to the south. 800 people inside these walls whose safety depended on the decisions he made in this room. He pressed both palms on the table and let one for all run through his system at low intensity, grounding himself, feeling the ambient aura energy of the settlement around him. 800 aura signatures, each distinct, each alive. Families who'd walked 11 days across Badlands. Former WF members trying to rebuild something they could be proud of. Children with lizard tails and rabbit ears who didn't understand why the world outside the walls was so much harder than the world inside. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we're going to do." He pulled the map toward him and started drawing. Oscar found him 2 days later. Not the Oscar that Izuku remembered from Ruby's descriptions of Beacon students, not the farm kid with too much responsibility on his face. This was an Oscar who moved differently, held himself differently, with layers to his expression that didn't quite belong to a teenage boy. Ojpin. Pressing through. Izuku met him at the settlement's eastern gate. Oscar was alone, no weapons, looking tired in a way that went deeper than physical. "You knew I was coming," Oscar said. "Danger sense." "Half a mile out." Izuku gestured toward the settlement. "Come in. Eat something." "I'm not, this isn't a social call. You're a 17-year-old kid who walked 3 days through grim territory to have a conversation with me. You're eating something." Oscar stared at him. Then he walked through the gate. Izuku fed him, actual hot food from the settlement's communal kitchen. Oscar ate with the ravenous focus of someone who had forgotten to eat because they were too busy being possessed by a centuries-old consciousness. Izuku sat across from him and waited. "He wants to talk to you," Oscar said. "Ojban." "I figured. Through me. He says he has information about Salem that changes the strategic picture. He always has information about Salem. It's how he gets people to do what he wants." Izuku watched Oscar's face. There was a fight happening behind his eyes, 2 people in one skull. "How are you doing?" "Not Ojban." "You." Oscar looked caught off guard. It's getting harder to tell." "Tell what?" "Where I end and he begins." He said it quietly. Matter of fact. Terrifying. "Oscar. That's not okay. You know that, right? You know that's not how it's supposed to be. It's the price of, it's not a price. It's a violation." Izuku leaned forward. "I've had people use me as a vessel for their ambitions before. The people who trained me, the system I worked inside. They all had plans that required me to stop being myself and start being a tool. It never ends with you intact." Oscar's hands, wrapped around his mug, went white-knuckled. "He loves Remnant," Oscar said. It came out like a defense. "I believe that. I also believe that someone who loves something can still manage it in ways that destroy the people closest to it." Izuku held his gaze. "What does Oscar want?" Silence. "A farm," Oscar said. "Finally. Small and honest. A normal life. To grow things and not have to. I didn't ask for this." "I know. You didn't ask for it either. What you have." "No. But the difference is what we do with it after." Izuku sat back. "Tell Ojban I'll hear him out. But he talks through you, not instead of you. I want to hear Oscar's opinion alongside his." Something shifted in Oscar's expression. Both of them, the boy and the ancient, processing that. Ojban's voice came through, smooth and practiced even through a teenager's throat. "You've built something impressive, Mr. Midoriya. But you're fighting battles on 3 fronts without understanding the war you're actually in." "Tell me about the war I'm actually in," Izuku said. Ojban explained Salem. The curse, the relics, the god's abandonment of Remnant. He explained maidens. He explained the centuries-long chess match, the sacrifices, the way he'd built and rebuilt his defenses across life after life. Izuku listened. He asked questions, sharp ones, pointed ones, the questions of someone who'd already done independent research and was checking it against a primary source. When Ojban finished, Izuku said, "You've been fighting her for thousands of years and the score is effectively 0-0. A pause. "The nature of her immortality makes a decisive conclusion, you haven't found a way to end the conflict permanently. She can't die, so you can't win, and you accept this as a permanent condition rather than as a problem to solve. If you believe there's a solution I haven't considered in several thousand years, I believe you stopped looking because the war became your purpose." Izuku said it without heat. Just observation. "You need Salem to exist. She gives the centuries of sacrifice meaning. If the war ended, all those lives spent, all those maidens lost, all those secrets kept, all that pain, would just be waste. The war continuing means it was all worth something." Absolute silence. Oscar was looking at the table, but his hands had relaxed. Like something held very tight had just been released. That, Ozpin said, with a voice that contained an enormous and complex weight, is perhaps the most devastating thing anyone has said to me in 400 years. I'm not trying to devastate you. I'm trying to find a better option. Izuku put his hands on the table. Salem's immortality has a source. It's not inherent, it was imposed by the god of darkness. If that connection can be severed, she can die. Or choose to live. Either way, the war ends. The connection is fundamental to her, I know. I've been reading everything available about the relics, the god's power, and the grim pools. And my quirk, my ability, has a component that stockpiles energy from any source it interfaces with. Including dimensional sources. I came through a rift between worlds. That rift left a residue that's still active in my system. He let one for all pulse, just slightly, green light at his hands. I might be able to absorb and redirect the curse energy if I can access the right amplification source. Ozpin was quiet for so long that Oscar looked up, confused. That is either the most brilliant or most catastrophically reckless plan I've ever heard, Ozpin said finally. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Oscar, not Ozpin, let out a short, surprised laugh. He looked startled by his own reaction. Ozpin pulled back, enough for Oscar to come forward. The boy looked at Izuku with clearer eyes. He's shaken, Oscar said. He doesn't show it but, he's actually thinking about it. Good. That means he's still capable of changing direction. Izuku stood. Oscar. The relic of choice. You're carrying it? Yes. Keep it safe. Not for Ozpin's plan. For the option I'm developing. He held out his hand. I'm not your enemy. I'm not Ozpin's enemy. I just refuse to be anyone's piece on a board. Oscar looked at the hand. Looked at Izuku. Then shook it. He left the next morning. Ozpin didn't say another word before he went. But on the settlement's eastern sensor array, there was a new data package, from Beacon's archives. Information on the relics. Information on the maiden powers. Information that Ozpin had been keeping secret for centuries, forwarded through a server route that traced back to Beacon's headmaster's office. An olive branch. Maybe. Or an investment in the only plan that might actually work. Izuku saved the files and got back to work. She came on the fourth night after Oscar's visit. Izuku was at the north wall, alone, doing his nightly check of the perimeter sensor array. The moons were both up, full, washing the landscape silver. The Grim had been quiet for 2 weeks, quieter than normal. His danger sense kept snagging on something at the edge of its range but never resolved it into an identifiable threat. He stopped. Someone was at the perimeter. Not approaching it, standing just outside it. Single figure. Or a signature unlike anything he'd encountered in 3 months on Remnant. Dense. Ancient. Wrong, in a way that raised every hair on his neck. Not a Grim. Not a soldier. Something else. He climbed down from the wall and walked toward the perimeter. She was standing at the tree line, 50 yards beyond the sensor range, which meant she knew exactly where the sensors were. She was wearing a traveling cloak that covered her from shoulder to heel, hood down. Her skin had a faint darkness to it that wasn't pigment but something else, like shadow had settled under the surface. Her hair was white. Her eyes were red. She looked nothing like the monster descriptions in Ozpin's files. She looked like a woman who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. Izuku stopped 10 feet from her and they looked at each other. Izuku Midoriya, she said. The anomaly. Salem, he said. She tilted her head. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people who know what I am experience considerable fear at this point in the conversation. Most people haven't been strapped to a table by their friends and thrown through the fabric of reality, he said. Fear index recalibrates after something like that. Something moved in her expression. Not warmth, she was too far from warmth for that. But recognition. The specific expression of someone who knows what it is to be destroyed by people who were supposed to protect you. I felt your arrival, she said. The dimensional rift. It resonated with the grim pools, something outside the brothers' creation breaching their world. And you came to check it out. I came to assess a potential threat. And is that what I am? She was quiet for a moment. The wind moved the trees around them. Her cloak shifted, and he caught a glimpse of her arm, the veining, dark and branching, that marked what the curse had done to her body over centuries. No, she said. You're something else entirely. I've been reading about your curse, Izuku said. She stiffened. Not as an attack vector, he said quickly. As a problem. I'm good at problems. Specifically, I've been reading about the nature of the God of Darkness's connection to you, the mechanism that makes you unkillable. He held her gaze. It's not invulnerability. It's a tether. The God's power keeps reknitting you because you're bound to him through the pool's blessing. If the tether could be cut, every huntsman and scholar who's spent 10 minutes reading about my condition comes to that conclusion, Salem said. The tether cannot be cut from this side. It requires the God of Darkness's cooperation, which is not forthcoming, or power sufficient to override a deity's will, which doesn't exist on Remnant. Doesn't exist on Remnant, Izuku said. What about from somewhere else? She went still. I came through a dimensional rift. I carry power that doesn't originate from Remnant or from the brothers' creation. My ability stockpiles force, any kind of force, any energy, from any source. Including dimensional energy. Including the residue from the rift that's still active in my system. He took one step forward. I don't know if it works. The mathematics are theoretical. But I've run the numbers 3 times and the pathway exists. The question is whether you want to try. Salem stared at him. Her red eyes were unreadable in the moonlight. If this was a trap, she said, it would be the most elaborate one in history. It's not a trap. It's an offer. He stopped. If I can break your curse, free you from the god's tether, would you stop? The war with Ojban. The grim armies. Would you actually stop? The question hung in the air for a long time. I've been at war for so long, Salem said, that I genuinely don't know what stopping looks like. That's not a no. Something crossed her face that he couldn't quite name. You're a very strange person, Mr. Midoriya. I've been told. To be clear, she said, and her voice had shifted, less guarded, more direct, like she was deciding to be honest for the first time in a long conversation with herself. I have no intention of trusting you. You are an anomaly in a world I understand comprehensively, which makes you dangerous. I will continue observing your operations and assessing your capabilities. That's fair. But. She paused. I will not move against you. Or your settlement. For now. For now is enough. She pulled her hood up. The cloak wrapped around her and she stepped back into the tree lean, and he watched the space where she'd been for a moment afterward. His danger sense was calm. Whatever she was, whatever 3,000 years of war and isolation and divine curse had made her, she hadn't been lying. Izuku walked back to the settlement walls. Ruby was at the gate, leaning out, watching him with the focused expression she got when she was worried but trying not to show it. Who was that? She said. A problem I'm working on, he said. She searched his face. Decided to trust the answer. Okay. Yang's been looking for you, she wants to go over the Northern Patrol rotation. I'll be there in 5 minutes. He looked back at the tree lean one more time. The moons were bright. The forest was quiet. Somewhere north of here, 3 Atlas frigates were sitting in the airspace, and Adam Taurus was talking to someone in a uniform, and the Grimm were mutating in patterns that didn't match Salem's operational signature. Something larger was paying attention. Something old, and patient, and divine. Izuku felt the dimensional residue in his chest pulse, that faint warmth of the rift's energy that had been sitting in him since the crossing. It pulsed again. And then, very faintly, like the deepest bass note in a piece of music, he felt something respond. From everywhere. From the ground and the sky and the dust in the air. Watching. He turned and walked inside. Whatever was coming, it would find him ready. Chapter 3, Sovereign 6 months. New Haven had a population of 4,000, 3 medical facilities, a functioning school, 17 agricultural plots, a militia that could field 300 trained fighters on 30 minutes notice, and a weekly market that traders from Vale's eastern settlements had started attending because the prices were fair and nobody got shaken down on the way in. Izuku stood on the northern wall at dawn and watched the morning light hit the settlement. Green lightning traced across his knuckles, slow and controlled, and his aura sat steady at full charge, which these days meant something that made Beacon's training sensors error out when he tested it. The aura integration had finished somewhere around month 4. One for All and Remnant's energy system had stopped negotiating and started collaborating. He was stronger than he'd ever been. He was also, for the first time in his life, genuinely happy. Not the brittle happiness of someone who'd achieved something and was waiting for it to be taken away. Something solid. Something that had roots. Ruby found him on the wall at 6:30, carrying 2 mugs of the terrible coffee they both pretended was acceptable. She handed him one, leaned her elbows on the battlements, and looked at the settlement with the same expression she'd been wearing more often lately, ownership, in the good sense. Pride. This is mine and I helped build it. We need to talk about the northern sensor array, she said. The blind spot between towers 9 and 11. Someone's been using it. I found movement traces 3 nights running. Controlled, deliberate, not grim. Izuku nodded slowly. I know. I've been letting it ride to see what they're watching. Ruby turned to look at him. And? They're watching me specifically. Movement pattern tracks my schedule. He sipped the coffee. It's not hostile surveillance, no weapon positioning, no preparation behavior. It's intelligence gathering. Salem. Or her people. She's been keeping her word, no aggression, no grim movement toward us. But she's curious. He looked at the tree lean beyond the walls. She's been coming closer every week. Ruby was quiet for a moment. She'd been processing Salem in stages, the academic reality of her first, then the strategic reality, and now the personal reality of a woman who showed up at the perimeter regularly and talked to Izuku in the dark. How close did she get last time? 20 feet from the wall. Izuku. She's not going to attack. Her emotional state when she's here, danger sense reads intent as well as threat level. She's not planning violence. He looked at Ruby. She's lonely. Ruby's expression went through something complicated. Ruby rose, who had never met a person she didn't eventually want to help, wrestling with the fact that the person who needed help was the immortal witch who'd been trying to destroy humanity for 3,000 years. You want to bring her in, Ruby said. I want to solve the problem she represents. Which also happens to solve the problem she has. He set down the coffee mug. She came back again last night. I know. I watched from the south tower. Ruby paused. She looks tired. Like, so tired. The kind that doesn't go away with sleep. 3,000 years will do that. Is it going to work? Your plan. Izuku was quiet for a moment. The honest answer was that the theoretical framework was solid but untested, the variables were enormous, and there was a real chance that attempting to absorb and redirect the God of Darkness's curse energy through a dimensional stockpile could level half the continent. The diplomatic answer was something reassuring. He went with honest. I don't know. But it's the best shot anyone's taken at the problem. And she knows it, that's why she keeps coming back. Ruby turned back to the view. The market was starting up below, vendors setting out stalls, the smell of food from the communal kitchen, kids already running between the housing blocks. When it happens, she said, I want to be there. I'd expect nothing less. She smiled. Then she punched his arm lightly, grabbed her coffee, and headed back down toward the settlement because Ruby Rose's idea of morning downtime lasted exactly as long as she could go without finding something to fix. Izuku watched her go. Then he turned back to the tree line. Today was going to be complicated. He just didn't know how complicated yet. The attack started at noon. Not from the north, where the Atlas frigates had been sitting for 2 months. Not from the east, where the White Fang had been regrouping. It came from directly above, a coordinated drop from 3 Atlas frigates that had moved overnight into position from 3 different vectors, approaching below sensor altitude through a combination of terrain masking and equipment that Blake's intelligence contacts hadn't known existed. Experimental. Atlas Black Budget. 6 months in development specifically for this operation. Izuku knew something was wrong when his danger sense detonated across every frequency simultaneously, not a single threat but a grid of them, descending from above in coordinated formations. He was in the planning building reviewing Weiss's infrastructure reports. He was through the door and into the open air in 1 second. The sky above New Haven was full of drop ships. Not standard Atlas military, different profile, darker, running with no visible markings. From their holds, soldiers were fast roping down in full-powered armor. But they moved wrong, too fluid, too coordinated, with a physical precision that human soldiers didn't naturally have. Grim hybrid soldiers. Blake had warned him this was coming. The intelligence had arrived 2 days ago. He'd been preparing for a week from now. Ironwood had moved early. At the same time, the eastern wall exploded. Not a missile, a shaped charge, placed against the wall from outside. The blast punched a 40-foot gap in the reinforced concrete. Through it, White Fang soldiers poured, in Atlas-supplied gear, better armed than they'd ever been, with coordination that screamed professional military advisory. Adam's voice through a bullhorn, surrender the settlement or we burn it. Izuku assessed the situation in 3 seconds. Above, 60-plus Grim hybrid soldiers descending. East, roughly 100 White Fang through the wall breach. North, the Atlas frigates repositioning, probably to provide fire support. His militia was scrambling, he could hear alarms, hear the settlement's defenders moving to their positions. 3 seconds was enough. He activated the command network, a radio system he and Ruby had built specifically for coordinated defense, and started talking. Ruby, the drop soldiers. They're fast and strong but watch the joints in the armor, it's experimental, the knee articulation is the weak point. Take them aerial, keep moving. He was already running toward the wall breach as he spoke. Weiss, eastern residential blocks, get the civilians into the hardened shelter beneath the supply building. Then I need your summoning on the wall breach to slow their advance. Yang, you have the ground defense on the western approach, assume they're going to try a secondary breach once our attention is east. Blake, supply line interdiction, north approach, the frigates have to be resupplying the drop soldiers from somewhere. 4 acknowledgements came back inside 2 seconds. His team. Izuku hit full cowling at 60% and went straight up. He cleared the wall in 1 jump and landed in the middle of the White Fang advance through the breach. 30 soldiers stopped moving. He was standing in the gap in their line, green lightning crackling across his entire body, and he was looking at them the way he looked at schematics, not with aggression, with assessment. Adam, he said, loud enough to carry. Come out from the back where you're hiding. A beat of silence. Adam walked forward through his own soldiers, wilt drawn. He looked better than the last time, rested, confident, wearing new gear. Atlas gear. This time, Adam said, I'm not alone. No. This time you're being used. Izuku turned his head slightly, addressing the White Fang soldiers directly. Not Adam, them. The man who armed you and planned this operation with you is General James Ironwood of Atlas. He has spent the last decade publicly supporting Faunus containment policies. He armed you to attack a settlement that has more Faunus families than any location outside of Menagerie. Think about what that means. Murmurs moved through the line. Adam's eyes went dark with fury. Don't listen to, he needed a Faunus attack on a Faunus settlement to justify a military intervention, Izuku continued. Your presence here is the pretext. Once the operation's done, once Ironwood has what he wants, you're the war criminals who attacked civilians. He's the hero who restored order. The murmuring got louder. Adam snarled and came in fast, faster than before, semblance precharged, blade glowing red before the swing even started. He'd learned from the last time. He'd been charging since he walked forward. Izuku waited until the last possible moment and sidestepped the discharge instead of the blade. The red wave of moonslice energy passed him on the right, tore through the wall behind him, and kept going for 50 yards. Adam's semblance was empty. Completely discharged. Izuku grabbed his sword arm at the wrist and held it. Walk away, he said quietly. Right now. Take your people and walk away. This is your last free exit. Adam's arm was shaking under his grip. His teeth were clenched. I won't, I know you won't. But your people might. He released Adam's wrist. Not because he was backing down, because he was giving the White Fang soldiers a moment to make a choice without their leader's shadow over them. 6 of them lowered their weapons first. Then 12. Then a ripple moved through the formation and 30 of them were standing down, not retreating but removing themselves from the equation. Adam stared at his own people with an expression that was cracking in real time. He'd given them purpose, anger, direction. Izuku had given them a reason to think. You broke them, Adam said. Low, disbelieving. They made a choice. That's different. Izuku turned away. There are grim hybrid soldiers above my settlement. I have things to do. If you're still here when I come back, we'll finish this. He left Adam standing in the breach. He'd made a calculation, Adam without his soldiers was a problem for later. The grim hybrid soldiers descending on the civilian population were a problem for right now. He went straight up again. The aerial fight was already in progress. Ruby was everywhere at once, silver and red streaks at the edge of vision, crescent rows singing through the air in its scythe configuration, taking the experimental soldiers apart at the joints exactly as Izuku had identified. Each impact sent them spinning, their grim hybrid physiology confusing their aura regulation enough that Ruby's targeted strikes were shattering it faster than normal. But there were too many, and more were still coming down from the drop ships. Izuku went for the drop ships. He launched himself from the wall at full power, float carrying him into the airspace above the settlement, green lightning turning his ascent into a streak of light. The first drop ship's pilot saw him coming and tried to veer. He caught the undercarriage with Black Whip, which was now stable, strong, and capable of holding 50 tons without dissolving. He swung himself around the ship's momentum, came up alongside the cargo bay, and drove his fist into the engine assembly. The ship's drives died. It began to fall. He grabbed it again with Black Whip and deposited it, carefully, deliberately, in the open ground outside the settlement walls rather than letting it crash into anything inhabited. Then he was already moving to the second ship. Third ship's pilot made the smart call and started gaining altitude, retreating to safe distance. With the drop ships neutralized, the grim hybrid soldiers already on the ground were cut off from resupply and reinforcement. Ruby's voice on the comms, aerial situation is controlled. How are we looking on the ground? Weiss, eastern breach is sealed. I have 3 summons holding the line and civilian evacuation is 80% complete. The White Fang formation at the breach is fragmented. They're not advancing. Yang, breathing hard and clearly mid-fight, western approach hit right on schedule, got about 40 soldiers in powered armor trying to breach the secondary wall. I'm handling it. Having a great time actually. Blake, confirmed resupply chain from the northern frigates. I've redirected it. Their ground forces are going to start running out of dust ammunition in approximately 20 minutes. Also, Ironwood is on the command frigate personally. He's not coordinating remotely. Izuku processed all of this in motion, already descending toward the main concentration of Grim hybrid soldiers in the settlement's central plaza. 12 of them, moving in coordinated formation toward the shelter building. They'd identified the civilian concentration and were heading for it. He came down in the middle of them. The impact crater was optional but he made it anyway, 60% smash on landing, the shockwave bowling the outer ring of soldiers off their feet. He was already moving before they hit the ground, full cowling at 70, and he fought the way he'd been building toward for 20 years of analysis and 6 months of aura integration. Each Grim hybrid soldier had 2 systems, Atlas power armor and Grim biological augmentation, fused at the neural level. He targeted the interface points. A precise black whip strike to the exposed nerve cluster at the base of the neck, where Atlas tech met Grim flesh, sent the Grim component into shutdown. A follow-up strike to the armor's power supply finished the rest. 8 seconds per soldier. 12 soldiers, 96 seconds, not one of them permanently damaged because these were people under that armor, enhanced, modified, weaponized by Ironwood, but people. He stood in the cleared plaza. The comms were running hot, all 4 of his people giving status, adjusting, moving. I'm going to the command frigate, he said. Ruby, Izuku, I'll be back. Hold the settlement. He went up. The Atlas command frigate was a quarter-mile long and sitting at 300 feet altitude. Its point defense cannons tracked him the moment he cleared the settlement walls. He counted 17 targeting locks in the time it took him to cross 200 yards of open air. They opened fire. He wove through it, float and full cowling at 80%, moving in 3 dimensions at speeds that made targeting solutions obsolete before they were calculated. A cannon round that would have taken off his arm instead carved a line of fire through the air 10 feet behind him. He felt the heat. He kept moving. He hit the frigate's hull at the observation deck level, drove his hand through the armored glass, and was inside before the alarm had finished its first cycle. Security teams, 8 soldiers, good ones, Atlas's best, converged on him in the corridor. He went through them fast and careful, disabling without permanent harm, and followed his internal map of Atlas frigate layouts toward the command center. The command center door opened before he reached it. Ironwood was standing in the corridor. No soldiers. No backup. Just him in his general's uniform, his cybernetic arms weapon systems fully deployed, and an expression that was composed and controlled, and underneath both of those things, deeply exhausted. You came alone, Ironwood said. You came to my settlement personally, Izuku said. It seemed polite to return the gesture. Stand down. Surrender New Haven to Atlas jurisdiction and I will guarantee the safety of your residents. You sent Grim hybrid soldiers into a settlement full of children. The operation was designed to minimize civilian. There's a 9-year-old girl with a lizard tail who's been in a shelter building for the last 40 minutes because your drop soldiers were heading for it. Izuku walked toward him slowly. She drew me a picture last week. Of the market. Of the walls. She wrote, home, on the bottom. He stopped 5 feet from Ironwood. That's what you tried to take today. Ironwood's jaw worked. If I allow an unauthorized power base to exist between kingdoms, it becomes a precedent. Every warlord, every faction, I'm not a warlord. You have a private army and territory and political influence that rivals small kingdoms. What would you call it? I'd call it what it is. People who had nowhere to go, building somewhere to be. With walls because the world outside has grim and corruption and generals who'll gas their own people to preserve order. Izuku's voice was even. No heat, just clarity. James. Ironwood's eyes sharpened at the name. I know why you do this, Izuku said. I've read everything about you. Atlas, the military, the dust trade, the protective infrastructure. You watched the world be fragile and you decided to make it hard. That's not wrong. The instinct is right. He took one more step forward. But you hardened the shell and let the inside rot. The people inside Atlas's protection aren't safer, they're more afraid. They're more controlled. They've traded one kind of vulnerability for another kind, and the people who couldn't make the trade got left outside the walls. That's idealism, that's New Haven. 4,000 people, former WF members and displaced families and humans and faunas, living together with a 90% reduction in grim pressure and a functional economy and a medical system that actually works. 4,000 people who were outside your walls. He held Ironwood's gaze. You can keep trying to destroy it. Or you can figure out why it works and do it better in Atlas. Ironwood's weapon systems hummed. He raised his cybernetic arm and pointed it directly at Izuku's face. Izuku didn't move. If you shoot me, he said, the footage from 6 different angles currently being broadcast to every major network on Remnant will show an Atlas general shooting an unarmed man in a corridor. He paused. I'm not bluffing. Blake set up the broadcast 3 weeks ago when we identified you as the escalating threat. Ironwood's arm stayed up for 5 seconds. Then it lowered. The weapon systems retracted. The sound in the corridor was just the hum of the frigate's engines. Your settlement will be treated as a neutral territory under provisional veiled jurisdiction, Ironwood said. His voice was stripped of everything but the fact. Atlas forces will disengage. And the grim hybrid soldiers? A long pause. The program will be reviewed. Shut it down. The people in those suits deserve better than what you did to them. Ironwood looked at him for a long, complicated moment. Then he reached up with his natural hand and pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. All Atlas units, this is General Ironwood. Stand down. Begin extraction. He turned and walked back into the command center. Izuku stood in the corridor for a moment. Then he turned and went back the way he came. By the time he reached the settlement, the battle was over. Yang had the western approach completely clear, she'd gone full semblance at some point, her hair blazing red gold, and the soldiers who tried to breach the secondary wall were scattered across 200 yards of open ground in various states of unconscious. She was standing among them with her hands on her hips, hair slowly cooling back to gold, and a look of profound satisfaction. How was your thing? She said when Izuku landed beside her. Resolved. Mine too. She looked at the unconscious soldiers. They were actually pretty tough. I had fun. Yang. I was very responsible about the fun. She turned to him, and the satisfaction shifted into something more direct. Everyone okay? Checking now. Ruby was fine, a graze on her arm from a point defense round that her aura had partially deflected. She was already coordinating the medical response for injured militia members, directing people with the calm focus she got during crises. Weiss had a burn on her left hand from a dust discharge she'd redirected. She was examining it with the expression of someone annoyed at their own body for being damaged. Blake was unhurt, moving through the aftermath gathering evidence, weapons with Atlas serial numbers, communication equipment with Atlas encryption standards. Building the case. The shelter building opened and the civilians came out. The girl with the lizard tail was first. She spotted Izuku and ran directly to him and grabbed his leg with both arms and didn't say anything. He crouched down and held on. He stayed like that for a minute. Then he got up and started the work of rebuilding the eastern wall. Oscar came back the next week. He came alone again, but he walked differently. Something in his posture had changed. More settled. More him. Ojban says he's sorry, Oscar said, in the planning building, over tea that Izuku had actually made properly this time. He wanted me to say it and then explain the strategic reasons why the apology serves his long-term objectives, but I told him I wasn't delivering it that way. How'd he take that? He was quiet for about an hour. Then he said, Oscar's expression went careful, like he was handling something fragile. He said I was right. That the apology should be what it is. How are you doing? Better. Oscar turned his mug in his hands. He's been, pulling back. Not disappearing but not pushing forward either. I think your conversation scared him. Not the curse plan. The thing you said about the war being his purpose. Izuku nodded. He wants to help, Oscar said. With the curse plan. He's been researching the relic interfaces for 2 weeks straight, which in Ojban terms means he hasn't slept and has consumed approximately 40 pots of coffee. A small smile. He thinks there's a stabilization mechanism in the relic of creation that could contain the redirect energy during the extraction process. Prevent it from venting sideways and leveling the continent, Izuku said. Yeah. That. Tell him I want the research. And tell him I want to talk to him directly, through you, but directly. Oscar's present for the whole conversation. Oscar's smile widened slightly. He already agreed to that. Before I asked. Progress. Izuku pulled the research files he'd been building and spread them across the table. The two of them went through it together, Oscar asking sharp questions that sometimes sounded like Ojban and sometimes sounded entirely like a 17-year-old kid who was just genuinely smart. After an hour, Oscar said, She's ready, isn't she? Salem. Getting there. What changed? Izuku thought about the previous week's conversation at the perimeter. Salem had been 15 feet from the wall. They'd talked for 2 hours. She'd told him about Ozma, not the history book version Ojban had provided but the actual version, the human one. A man she'd loved. A curse that had separated them. Centuries of grief calcifying into something that had forgotten it was grief. He hadn't tried to fix it. He'd just listened. When she left, she'd said, You're the most dangerous person I've encountered in 1,000 years, Midoriya. Because of the power? Because you listen and then you actually hear what was said. That's far more dangerous than any ability. Something shifted for her, Izuku told Oscar. She's been alive long enough that most conversations are repetitions of things she's heard before. I'm not. Oscar nodded slowly. Ojban will want to be present. For the extraction attempt. He should be. He knows her better than anyone alive. He knows the enemy she became, Oscar said quietly. You seem to know the person she was before. Izuku didn't answer that. But he didn't disagree either. The moment that everything changed came on a night when both moons were dark. Salem arrived at the north wall, not the perimeter this time. The wall itself. She stood directly below the battlements and looked up, and when Izuku appeared above her, she said, May I come in? He opened the gate. She walked into New Haven for the first time. Didn't speak. Just walked through the sleeping settlement, the market stalls covered for the night, the housing blocks lit softly from within, a few night shift workers moving between buildings. 2 of them saw her and froze. She noticed and stopped. I won't harm anyone, she said to them. Her voice was careful. Deliberate. Like someone who had spent so long being the thing in the dark that social reassurance was a foreign language being spoken from a textbook. The workers looked at each other. Then one of them nodded and kept walking. Salem watched them go with an expression that didn't have a name. Izuku led her to the planning building. Ruby was there, awake, because Ruby was always awake when something important was happening, as though the universe had given her an early warning system for significant events. Weiss was there. Blake. Yang. They all looked at Salem when she walked in. Yang's hands went to her gauntlets automatically and then stopped. Weiss went very still. Blake's ears flattened under her bow and then deliberately relaxed. Ruby said, Hi. I'm Ruby. Do you want tea? Salem blinked. Yes. Thank you. Izuku watched this, Salem accepting tea from Ruby rose with the bewildered care of someone who hadn't been offered something simple and kind in longer than memory, and felt something click into place. The architecture of what he was building wasn't about walls and supply chains and militia training. It was about this. A girl who'd been through divine war and 3,000 years of loss, sitting in a warm room with people who offered tea. The relic of creation, Izuku said. I need access to it for the extraction attempt. Ojban's research suggests it can serve as a stabilization matrix during the redirect. Salem looked at him over the tea mug. The relic of creation is in Atlas. I know. We're going to get it. She stopped. You make that sound simple. It won't be. But we have Blake's intelligence network, Weiss's knowledge of Atlas financial structures and their relationship to the military procurement system, Ruby who can move faster than Atlas's sensor array can track, and Yang who I'm genuinely starting to suspect is incapable of failing at any physical task she commits to. Yang pointed at him. That's accurate. And we have you, Izuku said to Salem. Who knows Atlas's defensive infrastructure because you've been probing it for 2 centuries. Salem's expression went through something complex. You want my help. I need your help. There's a difference. Wanting is optional, needing means I'm asking because you're the right person for the role, not as a strategic calculation. She was quiet for a long moment. The others waited, Ruby curled in her chair, Yang leaning against the wall, Weiss sitting straight-backed, Blake watching with amber eyes that were reading everything. What is this to you? Salem asked. The curse. Solving it. You have power enough to destroy me. Ojban has been trying to find ways to end the war through my death for millennia. Why cure the problem instead of eliminating it? Because you're not a problem, Izuku said. You're a person with a problem. And because killing you to end the war is Ojban's answer, which has a 3,000-year track record of not working. He met her eyes. And because I think you've been alone so long that you've forgotten what it's like to have something to live for. I want to give that back to you. Not as a strategic move. As a human thing. The room was very quiet. Salem's hands, wrapped around the mug, had the dark veining of the curse running across them, visible, stark, ancient. She looked at them. If this works, she said. If I'm mortal again. I'll be old. The years I should have lived, the curse's physical effects revert with the tether, Ojban had told him in their last research session, Oscar's voice carrying the old headmaster's weight. The body returns to the state it would have been in, had the curse never been applied. You'll be yourself, Izuku said. The actual you. Not what the war made you. Salem closed her eyes. All right, she said. They hit Atlas 9 days later. The plan was specific, fast, and built around the assumption that Ironwood, despite his political defeat, still had Atlas's military resources and would respond with everything available the moment they were detected. The relic of creation was in Atlas Academy's deepest vault. Getting there required bypassing 4 security layers, a biometric lock system that Weiss had the override codes for from her SDC access days, a specialist-level aura recognition barrier that needed Ruby's precise silver-eyed disruption pulse to confuse, and a physical door that Blake's intelligence said was made from a dust metal composite that resisted cutting. Izuku just punched it. They were in and out in 11 minutes. Ironwood scrambled 3 wings of paladins when the vault alarm triggered. Ruby was already carrying the relic at full semblance speed toward the extraction point before the first paladin deployed. Yang held the approach corridor for 4 minutes while Weiss and Blake handled the electronic countermeasures and communication blackout. Izuku stood at the vault-level entrance and let the first 6 paladins come to him. The fight footage leaked within hours. A man in green lightning, alone, disabling Atlas military paladins with efficiency that the commentators describing it couldn't find adequate language for. He didn't destroy them, he removed their weapon systems and their mobility systems and left them intact, because the operators inside were soldiers doing their jobs. When the 7th paladin came through the wall already firing its main cannon, he caught the round with F.A. Jean, stored it, and returned it as a focused pressure wave that took the paladin's legs off without touching its armored core. The operator walked out unharmed through the hole the paladin's fall made in the floor. 11 minutes. They were out before Ironwood reached the command center. The return to New Haven was quiet. They moved fast and without incident, and by the time Ironwood confirmed the relic was gone, they were already home. Salem was waiting in the planning building. She'd stayed, which itself felt significant. 6 months ago she wouldn't have been findable if she didn't want to be. Now she was sitting at the planning table with a pot of tea she'd made herself, which Ruby later said was genuinely one of the most startling things she'd ever witnessed. Izuku set the relic of creation on the table. It pulsed with amber light, warm and steady, the way a fire looks when it's been burning for a long time in a stone fireplace. Oscar arrived an hour later with the relic of choice. He'd been carrying it. He set it beside creation and they both pulsed, resonating with each other. The other two relics, Weiss said. Destruction is in vacuo. Knowledge is at beacon. Ojpin, through Oscar, answered. We don't need them for the extraction. Creation as a stabilization matrix and choice as an intent anchor should be sufficient. Izuku had spent 9 days running the process in his head. The extraction attempt worked like this. Salem's curse was a tether of divine energy running from the god of darkness's pool through her, maintaining her immortality by force regenerating her whenever the body failed. The tether was constant, invisible, and operated below the level of any remnant-based power to effect. One for all stockpiling, however, didn't operate on remnant-based rules. It operated on rules from another world entirely, a world the brothers hadn't made, hadn't touched, didn't have authority over. The dimensional residue in Izuku's system was, in effect, energy from outside the brothers' jurisdiction. The plan: Izuku pushes one for all to maximum stockpile, everything in reserve, FA gene full, every vestige contributing, the aura integration multiplying output, and channels it directly into Salem's curse tether. Not attacking it. Absorbing it. The way One for All had always grown by taking in power from outside sources. He absorbs the tether's energy into One for All's stockpile, where it becomes inert, stripped of divine authority by passing through an interdimensional filter. The relic of creation stabilizes the process so the energy doesn't vent laterally and take out the surrounding countryside. The relic of choice acts as an intent anchor. It ties the process to Salem's genuine choice to be free, which provides the directional framework the absorbed energy needs to dissipate cleanly. The risk: if One for All's stockpile can't contain the tether energy, if the god of darkness's power is too vast, the release could kill Izuku, kill Salem, and do unpredictable things to Remnant's grim population which was still tied to the same divine source. He hadn't told the others about that part. Ruby told him she already knew. I did the math, she said, the night before, sitting beside him on the north wall. The variables you didn't explain are obvious if you know how your power works. Ruby, I'm not asking you to stop. I'm telling you that I know. She took his hand. And I'm telling you that if it goes wrong, you're not going out alone. Whatever happens, we're there. He tried to argue. She'd given him a look that closed the argument without a word. They'd been together 6 months. He'd learned that look. They set it up in the open ground north of New Haven, outside the walls, on a clear night with both moons up and the air cold and still. No grim anywhere in range, unusual, like the world was holding its breath. The settlement's lights were warm behind them. Salem stood in the center of the space they'd cleared. She'd dressed simply, no War Queen aesthetic, just plain dark clothing that she'd borrowed from the settlement's clothing exchange and clearly found confusing as a concept. Her white hair was loose. The veining of the curse ran up her neck, her hands, visible and ugly and old. She looked at Izuku standing across from her. If this kills you, she said, I want it noted that I advised against it. Noted. I'm being serious. I know. You're always serious. He held her gaze. Are you ready? She looked down at her hands. At the curse that had been in her flesh for 3,000 years, that had taken everything from her, her husband, her children, her humanity, her grief, eventually even her hope. She'd been so far past hope for so long that the feeling Izuku had brought back was almost unrecognizable. Yes, she said. Ruby was on Izuku's left, crescent rose in her hands but pointed at the ground. Weiss was to his right, Mertenaster drawn, a summoning circle already prepared for rapid deployment if containment was needed. Blake was at the north perimeter, tracking for threats. Yang was behind him, he could feel her there without looking, steady as bedrock. Oscar stood to the side, relic of choice in his hands. The amber of creation sat on a stone platform they'd built for it, warm and steady. Both relics were already resonating, they'd activated the moment Salem arrived in their proximity. Ojban, through Oscar, said one thing, "Be careful, my boy." It was the first time he'd called Izuku that. Izuku took a breath. Let it out. Then he let one for all open. Not partial. Not controlled. All of it, every gate, every reserve, every stockpile he'd built across 6 months of aura integration and dimensional energy absorption. The green lightning that usually traced across his skin became something else entirely, a sustained radiance that lit the clearing like a sun, casting hard shadows from the trees, making the moon's light look dim. He felt the vestiges activate alongside him. 9 lives of compressed power, each voice distinct, all of them pushing in the same direction. All for one, he thought, and nearly laughed at the irony of the phrase. He stepped forward and placed both hands on Salem's shoulders. She flinched, not from pain, from the contact. He suspected she hadn't been touched gently in a very long time. "Stay with me," he said. She met his eyes. Held them. He pushed. One for all reached through his hands into the curse, not an attack, a request, the same way the quirk had always grown by being offered rather than seized. He felt the tether immediately. It was vast, deep, running through Salem like the root system of something enormous. Ancient. Divine. The god of darknesses were made solid and woven into her cells. It pushed back. The force that hit him wasn't physical. It was weight, the sheer authority of a god who had made this world, who had written the rules of this reality, who didn't recognize anything from outside his creation as having standing to interfere. One for all flickered. The green lightning stuttered. He felt the stockpile hemorrhage energy into the ground, into the air, into nothing. His knees buckled. He did not go down. Izuku. Ruby's voice behind him. Not panicked, steady. Anchoring. He thought about restraint tables. About the extraction needle. About All Might's absence and Bakugo's reaching hand and everything that had tried to hollow him out and failed. He thought about a 9-year-old girl with a lizard tail who drew pictures of her home. He thought about a community market and terrible coffee and Ruby's laugh and Yang's honesty and Weiss's precision and Blake's courage and a woman with ancient eyes learning to accept tea from a stranger. He pushed harder. One for all roared. The relic of creation blazed, amber light flooding the clearing, forming a lattice structure in the air above them, the stabilization matrix snapping into place exactly as Ojban's research had predicted. The relic of choice pulsed in Oscar's hands, hot enough that he gasped, and the intent anchor locked, Salem's genuine, chosen desire for freedom, crystallized and made real by the relic's function. The tether resisted. The divine weight pushed back harder. Then it cracked. Not broke, cracked first. A sound that wasn't a sound, something below hearing, a vibration that went through the earth and up through his feet and through his hands and through Salem, and he felt her sharp intake of breath. He poured everything in. Every last stored jewel of One for All, every scrap of dimensional residue, every unit of aura the settlement's living souls had contributed just by being alive around him for 6 months, every vestige pushing their power into his. The tether broke. The energy that released was enormous and the relic of creation aided, the lattice blazing white, absorbing, containing, redirecting outward and upward and away, into the sky, a column of light visible from Veil that would have the news networks running coverage for a week. Izuku's hands left Salem's shoulders and he sat down very hard on the ground. He was empty. Completely, totally empty, one for all stockpile at absolute zero for the first time since he'd learned to manage it. His aura was shattered. His body felt like he'd done 100% smash in every limb simultaneously. He couldn't feel his hands. Ruby was beside him instantly, arms around him, which helped with the staying upright problem. "I'm okay," he said. His voice came out strange. "You don't look okay." "I'm okay," he repeated, because saying it twice makes it more true apparently. He looked at Salem. She was on her knees in the grass. The veining, the dark curse branching across her skin, was fading. He watched it happen. Like ink washing out of cloth, slowly, the darkness retreating from her hands, her arms, her neck. The white of her hair stayed. The red of her eyes stayed. But the texture of her skin changed, softened. The years the curse had frozen became visible. She looked younger, actually, as the divine preservation dissolved and left only the woman underneath. She was looking at her hands. She was crying. Not dramatically. Just, tears running down her face that she didn't wipe away and maybe didn't feel, staring at her own hands like she was checking whether they were real. Izuku got up, Ruby kept one hand on his arm because she was sensible, and walked to Salem. He crouched in front of her. "Hey," he said. She looked at him. Her eyes were still red but they were clear now, present, fully there in a way they hadn't always been during their conversations at the perimeter. Like something that had been filtering her perception had been removed. "I can feel the cold," she said. Wonder. Like temperature was the most remarkable thing she'd ever encountered. "I couldn't feel cold." She stopped. "I couldn't feel it." "It's a nice night," Izuku offered. Something that was not quite a laugh escaped her. Then she reached forward, put both hands on his face, and looked at him with 3,000 years worth of someone who had forgotten what it felt like to receive something freely given. "Thank you," she said. Quiet. Just that. He covered her hands with his. Behind him, Yang said, "Okay, I'm not crying, it's the dust particles in the air." Weiss said, "There are no dust particles in the air, Yang." "Then it's the other thing in the air." "Tears are an appropriate response," Blake said, and she was not entirely unaffected herself. Ruby was fully crying and not pretending otherwise, which was the most Ruby thing possible. The gods came at dawn. Izuku had been half expecting it. The extraction had sent a column of divine energy back toward its source, an enormous signal, unmistakable. The brothers had felt it. The sky to the east went wrong first, not dark, not dramatic, just suddenly and completely still. No wind. No birdsong. The ambient aura energy in the air went flat, like something had pressed a hand down on it. Then they appeared. Not physically, in bodies, as presences. Two immense forces at the edge of perception, like standing next to a waterfall and feeling the spray without seeing the water. One bright, almost painful. One dark, absolute. Izuku was on the north wall when it happened. He felt them before he saw any effect. Danger Sense didn't scream, that was the terrifying part. Danger Sense screamed at threats it could categorize. This was beyond categorization. His power simply recognized something of an entirely different order and went very, very quiet. The sky cracked. Not like lightning, like glass, a long fracture running from horizon to horizon, and through the fracture came light that was both colors and none. Izuku Midoriya. The voice came from everywhere. Not loud, present, the way gravity is present. "You are not of this creation." Ruby was beside him. Yang. Weiss. Blake. Salem, who had come to the wall and was looking up at the fracture with an expression of pure, cold fury. Oscar was there too. He'd been in the settlement. He arrived at a run, relic of choice in both hands, relic of creation that Weiss was holding blazing amber in response to the divine presence. I know, Izuku said, to the sky. You have no authority here. No standing. You have contaminated our creation with foreign power and severed a covenant we established. The covenant was a curse on a person who asked for death, Salem said beside him. Her voice was steady. That was never authority. That was cruelty. The dark presence shifted. The god of darkness, turning its attention to the woman it had cursed. You were an example. I was a person, Salem said. I still am. The anomaly must be removed, the god of light said. Remnant must be purified. The experiment is over, Izuku said. Silence. Not the polite silence of a conversation pause. The silence of two ancient beings encountering something they hadn't been told to expect. You made a world, Izuku said. You put people in it. You set rules you never told them. You punished them for not following instructions they couldn't read. You left when it got complicated and called it a test. He looked up at the fracture in the sky. In my world, we'd call that failure of duty of care. You built something and then used it as a toy. We are gods, the god of light said. The temperature dropped. You cannot, I can't fight you, Izuku said. I know that. You're not something I can punch into a hole and have a conversation with. You exist at a level my power doesn't reach. He held his ground on the wall. But I don't have to fight you to stop you. Because you want to reset Remnant, start over, wipe the experiment clean. And the thing about a reset is it only works if you can access what you're resetting. He looked at Oscar. Oscar raised the relic of choice. Weiss raised the relic of creation. I'm locking the door, Izuku said. You can't reset what you can't reach. He activated One for All, completely empty, stockpile at 0, but the dimensional residue from the rift was still there. The rift he'd torn coming to Remnant. The crack between worlds that had never fully sealed. He'd been carrying it for 6 months. He knew its energy signature better than his own heartbeat. He pushed every last scrap of dimensional energy, not at the gods, not as an attack, but into the rift itself. Sealing it. Not from his side, from the god side. The rift was the only point of intersection between their authority and Remnant's physical reality. Seal the rift, and their ability to directly intervene in Remnant becomes theoretical rather than actual. The relics blazed. Both of them, amber and white, activating fully for the first time in their history, responding to the intent anchor of Salem's choice and the creative framework of Izuku's plan. The Grim across Remnant, every last one, felt the divine connection to the god of darkness shudder and then sever. Without the tether, they had no direction, no purpose, no animating force. They began to dissolve. Everywhere. All at once. The Grim of Remnant, from the smallest Beowulf to the great Leviathans in the sea, simply coming apart, returning to the dark energy they'd always been, without the divine will to maintain their forms. The fracture in the sky blazed white and dark simultaneously as the gods pushed back. Izuku felt it hit him, not physically, but as a force against his will, his presence, his right to exist in a place he hadn't been made for. He dug in. Salem raised her hand beside him. No grim army, no dark power, just her. A mortal woman, freed from divine authority, standing in the gap between gods and the world they'd abandoned. We chose this world, she said. I choose it. This is what choice does, it removes your authority to override us. The relic of choice burned so bright that everyone shielded their eyes. The fracture in the sky sealed. The divine presences withdrew, not gone, never gone, but locked out. Sealed behind a barrier made of dimensional energy and genuine human choice that the brothers hadn't factored into their architecture because they hadn't thought humans capable of building it. The sky was just sky again. Both moons, pale and permanent. Stars. Cold dawn air. They stood on the north wall in the silence that followed and nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Yang said, "Did we just kick out God?" "Gods." "Plural," Weiss said. Her voice was remarkably steady for someone who had just participated in a divine lockout using a magical artifact. "We locked them out," Izuku said. "They still exist. They're just outside." "Good," Ruby said. She was looking at the sky with silver eyes that were doing something complex and beautiful and possibly holy. They weren't taking care of it anyway. Salem sat down on the wall's edge. She looked at her hands again, still mortal, still real, still here. She looked at the settlement below, waking up in the dawn, people moving between buildings, morning smoke from the communal kitchen chimneys. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "Live. Just, live." "None of us really do," Izuku said. "We figure it out." She looked at him sideways. Then at Ruby, who was smiling at her. At Weiss, who offered a precise nod that somehow contained genuine warmth. At Blake, who was watching her with amber eyes that knew something about starting over. At Yang, who shrugged and said, "Welcome to the team, I guess," in a tone that meant it. Salem looked back at the settlement. "There are children down there," she said. "Yeah," Ruby said. "I've never," she stopped. "I have children. Had. 3,000 years ago. I can't," she stopped again. "We know," Izuku said. "You don't have to fix that right now." She nodded once. Controlled. But her hands, in her lap, were trembling. 3 months later. The settlement had grown to 6,000. The news networks were calling it the fastest-growing population center in Remnant's recorded history, which was statistically remarkable and administratively terrifying. Weiss had the resource management under control, barely, but under control, and the governance council was meeting 3 times a week to handle the scale. The kingdoms were having complicated feelings about all of it. Vale was nominally supportive, primarily because Izuku's operation bordered their territory and being supportive was more pragmatic than being hostile. Vacuo sent a formal delegation who spent a week in the settlement, ate the food, admired the infrastructure, and went home to write a report that was apparently extremely complimentary. Mistral sent nothing and said nothing, which Ojban, through Oscar, described as Mistral's traditional response to things they don't understand. Atlas was rebuilding its civilian government after Ironwood's military adventure and the subsequent political disaster. Ironwood himself had stepped back from active command, still in his position, technically, but quieter. He'd watched the footage of the divine confrontation, which had been captured by Blake's broadcast network from 6 angles. He'd watched it twice in silence and then said, through a channel that reached Weiss, "Your settlement's defensive protocols remain impressive. If you ever want to discuss comparative methodology, my door is open." It was as close to an olive branch as Ironwood could build with the tools he had. Weiss wrote back, "Schedule a meeting. Bring someone who isn't military. Have them do most of the talking." She sent it to Izuku for review. He approved it without changes. Adam Taurus had disappeared after the battle. Blake's intelligence network tracked him through 2 border crossings and then lost him in Vacuo's interior. He wasn't a priority, whatever he was doing, it was small, and small could wait. Oscar was at Beacon, finishing his schooling. Ojban was present but genuinely different, less total, less consuming. He described it, through Oscar, as resting. Oscar described it as, "He's finally letting me be a person," which is alarming for both of us but mostly fine. Izuku found Ruby in her workshop at midnight, which was where she always was at midnight because Ruby Rose had approximately 3 modes, fighting, sleeping, and building things. She had new designs on her table, modifications to Crescent Rose that incorporated dust weaving techniques she developed by watching how Weiss integrated dust into combat. The pages were covered in her handwriting in small precise drawings and occasional doodles of weapons in the margins. She was also, very visibly, not just tired from late-night design work. He leaned in the doorway. When were you going to tell me? She looked up. Her silver eyes went through approximately 6 expressions in 2 seconds. Tell you what? Ruby. She set down her stylus. Then she turned to face him fully, chin up, with the specific posture she used when she was committing to something completely. 3 weeks ago I noticed, she said. I was going to tell you when I was sure. Are you sure now? Yes. He crossed the workshop and sat beside her. She watched him the whole way, reading his face, one hand resting on the table near the drawings. He took her hand. Okay, he said. Okay. She searched his expression. That's it? Just okay. We're building a dynasty, he said. That was always the plan. He squeezed her hand. This is the plan working. Ruby laughed, startled and bright and real, and then she leaned her head against his shoulder and he felt her exhale completely, the tension she'd been carrying for 3 weeks letting go at once. I was a little scared, she said. That it was too fast. Or too much. Is it too much for you? No. Immediate. Certain. Is it too much for you? No. They sat in the workshop with the design pages and the quiet and the 2 moons outside the window. We should tell the others, Ruby said. In the morning. Yang's going to be insufferable about being right. Yang is always insufferable about being right. She's also going to be really happy, Ruby said softly. Yeah. She is. Weiss told him 3 weeks after Ruby. She did it formally, sitting across the planning table from him during what was supposed to be a supply chain review, and she said, I have something to add to the agenda, and then looked at the table and said it in the clipped, controlled voice she used when she was feeling something too large for her usual register. He got up, walked around the table, and hugged her, which was apparently not what she was prepared for because she went completely rigid and then gradually, incrementally, hugged him back. I'm not good at this, she said, into his shoulder. The hugging or the telling me things? All of it. The feeling things in front of people. I know. I just want you to know that this is what I want. I want to be clear about that. Weiss. Yes. I know. You walked out of your father's house in the middle of the night with a sword and a travel case and you've been building something real every day since. You don't have to explain what you want. It's been obvious for months. She pulled back slightly. Her eyes were dry. Weiss Schnee didn't cry in front of people except in very specific circumstances, but they were bright. You're annoyingly observant. It's a problem I have. She straightened. Smoothed her jacket. Returned to the supply chain review. But she moved her chair 2 inches closer to his and kept her hand near his on the table, and that, for Weiss, was as loud as shouting. Blake came to him in the evening, outside, near the eastern wall where she did her thinking. She told him without preamble, standing with her arms crossed and her ears visible and her expression set in the way she wore when she'd made a decision and didn't want to discuss whether it was the right one. I know, she said, that this is complicated. The political landscape. My history. The White Fang connection that's still, Blake. A liability in terms of public perception, and I know that having me associated with, Blake. She stopped. I've been in love with you since you walked into that community meeting and sat in the back corner and listened with your whole self, he said. The politics can figure themselves out. She uncrossed her arms. Her ears were doing something she probably wasn't aware of, tilting forward, attentive, the involuntary body language of someone receiving something they weren't sure they deserved. When, she said. When I first knew. Or when did it become, this? He thought about it honestly. The 3rd week. You were mediating between the WF former members and the family who'd lost someone to a WF attack and it was going badly, and you stopped in the middle of it and said, I know I can't give you back what was taken. Neither can they. But they came here instead of going back. What does that mean to you? And the woman didn't answer for about 30 seconds, and then she said it meant they chose this instead. He held Blake's gaze. You gave her a framework for it. That wasn't strategy. That was you, knowing what it means to choose something better than what you came from. Blake looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and kissed him, which was Blake's way of saying the thing that was too large for words, and he kissed her back, which was his. Yang he didn't have to tell anything. Yang knew everything 3 days before Ruby told him, because Yang Xiaolong had an instinct for the people she loved that functioned like a low-level semblance, and she'd been watching all of them too closely for too long to miss something that's significant. She told him she knew on a Tuesday morning during their sparring session, in between a right cross he ducked and a spinning kick he redirected. Ruby told me she told you, she said, blocking his counter. Weiss thinks she's being subtle. She's not. She came in with a combination he had to use Black Whip to redirect. Blake did the whole, I should probably mention, thing, didn't she? More or less. Classic Blake. She landed and squared off again, hands up, eyes lilac and warm. So. We're doing this. All of us. For real, for keeps, build a future kind of real. Yes. Yang looked at him across the sparring mat. She'd stopped attacking, they were just standing there in the middle of a sparring session having what was possibly the most important conversation of both their lives. Good, she said. Because I'm all in, and I don't go all in on things that aren't real. She lowered her hands. Also I'm going to need a bigger room. We're building a larger residential block for the council housing. Convenient. She picked the fight back up. But she was smiling the whole time, the real one, the one that didn't have any performance in it. A month later she came to find him with the same look Ruby and Weiss and Blake had worn, and she told him standing up, arms at her sides, chin level, with the absolute commitment she brought to everything she decided to do. Your kid is going to be terrifying, he said. Our kid, she corrected immediately. And obviously. They'll be amazing. Salem found him planting things. This was new. She'd been spending time in the settlement, not at night anymore, in daylight, which had taken the residents a few weeks to adjust to and which she navigated with the careful deliberateness of someone learning a language by immersion. She'd taken to working in the settlement's garden plots, which nobody had assigned her to and which she seemed to have decided was her responsibility by some internal logic that nobody questioned. He found her there sometimes, in the early mornings, working soil with her hands in a way that was as far from her War Queen history as anything he could imagine. Today she found him, at the edge of the eastern plot, putting in seedlings for the next growing cycle. She crouched beside him and took a seedling from the tray without asking. Planted it with the practiced care of someone who'd been doing this for 3 weeks and was discovering she was good at it. You're feeling it, Izuku said. Not a question. He'd learned to read her the way he read everyone, which in Salem's case meant learning to see past 3,000 years of concealment to the actual person underneath. The mortality, she said. Flat. My body is, recalibrating. To age, to time, to the normal processes I haven't experienced since Ozma was alive. She planted another seedling. I am handling it. I know you are. It's strange. My body hurts in ordinary ways. Sore muscles. A headache from poor sleep. I was going to say I was offended by it, but actually, she stopped. It's real. It's ordinary. It's so ordinary and I don't have words for, having a headache means you're alive, Izuku said. Yes. She was quiet for a moment. That's exactly it. They planted in silence for a while. The morning was cool and the soil was good, they'd worked it for 3 months and the quality was starting to show. The others, Salem said. They're all, yes. And you're, yes. She set down a seedling. You're building a family. I am. I had one, she said. Quiet, flat, the voice of someone stating a fact that still hurts but has been processed enough to say. Children. A husband. I remember what that is. I know. She looked at him. Her red eyes were clear and present, and this was still new enough that he noticed every time, genuinely warm. I want to be clear about something, she said. Okay. What I feel when I'm here, with you, with this, is real. I'm not confused about what it is or why. I've had 3,000 years to understand myself in ways most people don't get. She held his gaze. I'm not going to do the thing where I pretend it isn't happening or frame it as something other than what it is. I appreciate that. I'm also not, I know I'm not the same as they are. Ruby and the others. I come with 3,000 years of complicated history and recently discontinued immortality and a therapeutic backlog that would defeat a team of psychologists. Salem. Yes. Do you want to be here? She looked at the seedling in her hand. At the plot they were working. At the settlement visible through the eastern gate, the market, the housing blocks, the school where children were already arriving for morning classes. At the wall she'd stood outside of for weeks before she came through the gate. Yes, she said. Then be here. She planted the seedling. Precisely, deliberately, exactly where it needed to go. I'll need a larger room eventually, she said. He laughed. Actually laughed, the surprised, delighted kind. That's the second time someone's told me that this month. When you build a family, space becomes relevant. She said it matter-of-factly. Like it was already decided. Like she'd made the calculation and reached the conclusion and was simply informing him of the result. He looked at her, this woman who had been a queen, a weapon, a force of destruction, a prisoner of divine cruelty, and was now sitting in the dirt planting seedlings in a refugee settlement with soil under her fingernails, and felt something that was possibly the largest emotion he'd ever experienced, which was impressive given the 6 months he'd been living. I'll add it to the building plans, he said. She nodded. Picked up another seedling. They worked in the garden until the morning light hit the walls and the market came alive and children ran through the eastern gate to look at what was growing, and the girl with the lizard tail crouched next to Salem and pointed at a seedling and said, "What's that one gonna be?" And Salem told her, precisely and thoroughly, and the girl listened with enormous eyes, and behind the wall the settlement lived its day around them like water around stones. Izuku stood on the north wall in the evening. His power was rebuilt, one for all restocked, aura at full charge, all systems integrated and stable. He was stronger than he'd ever been. The battles were won. The walls held. The gods were locked out. The Grimm were gone, not reduced, gone, the dissolution complete and permanent, confirmed by every researcher who'd studied the phenomenon in the 3 months since. Remnant without Grimm was a different world. The fear that had saturated the air since the gods made the Grimm was lifting, slowly, the way weather changes, not immediately, but perceptibly. Positive emotion cycling through communities that had been saturated with anxiety for generations. Children playing outside city walls for the first time in history. Settlements expanding into territory that had been Grimm country since before living memory. He was part of that. He and his people and everything they'd built. He thought about his old world. He did this sometimes, not with longing, exactly. More like visiting a photograph. He could still feel the dimensional residue in his chest, faint now that he'd expended so much of it in the divine lockout, but present. The rift was sealed. He couldn't go back. He'd accepted that, truly, months ago. But sometimes he wondered. All Might, old and retired and probably sitting in the apartment Izuku had never visited, wondering where his successor had gone. The classmates who'd stood in that room. Bakugo, who'd been reaching. He'd been betrayed. He didn't minimize it and he didn't carry it like a wound anymore. It was a fact about what happened, and what happened had brought him here. To this wall. To this settlement. To the 4 women whose lights he could see through different windows of the residential block, Ruby's workshop bright, Weiss's office lamp on, Blake's reading light, Yang's already dark because she was asleep at a reasonable hour because pregnancy had made her into a person who slept, which she was furious about and he found endearing. To Salem, who was in the garden plot even now, in the dark, doing something with the seedlings that she determined needed attention and wasn't going to stop until she was satisfied. He'd been thrown out of his world, and he'd built a new one. Not perfectly. Not without cost. Not without the ongoing work of maintaining something good in a world that defaulted toward difficulty. The councils still argued. The integration still had friction points. The kingdoms still had their own ambitions. The world without Grimm was creating new power vacuums that were going to require navigation. But the walls held. Every morning he checked them and they held. He heard footsteps, multiple, coming up the wall stairs. Ruby first, because Ruby was always first to anywhere. Yang behind her, one hand on the railing because the pregnancy had shifted her center of gravity and she was adapting, with great dignity and moderate profanity, to this fact. Weiss moving carefully, 2 mugs of coffee, real coffee, decent coffee, she'd sourced an actual supply chain, and Blake at the back, quiet, always reading the environment before she entered it. They came to the wall and stood with him in the evening. Ruby leaned on the battlement. Yang stood beside her. Weiss handed Izuku a mug and kept one. Blake sat on the battlement's edge and looked out at the landscape, the forest, the mountains, the absence of red grim eyes and the darkness that was still remarkable every single time. From the garden below, they could see Salem's white hair, bent over the plants. She's going to know every plant in that garden by name within a month, Ruby said. She already does, Blake said. She was explaining root systems to Keiko, the girl with the lizard tail, for an hour this afternoon. I heard, Yang said. Keiko told me she's going to be a botanist when she grows up. Yesterday she wanted to be a fighter pilot. The day before, a chef. She's 7, Weiss said. She's allowed to change her mind. I'm just saying, Salem has apparently made botany very compelling. They stood in the evening quiet. The settlement was winding down around them, market stalls covered, cooking smoke tapering off, lights in windows. 4,000 people living their lives inside walls that held. What's next? Ruby said. Not urgently. Just curious. The question of someone who knows the thing they're building is ongoing. The Mistral delegation sent a formal request this morning, Weiss said. They want to discuss trade agreements. Which means they've decided we're permanent enough to invest in. That took them long enough, Yang said. Mistral processes things at Mistral speed, Weiss said. Which is to say, slowly and with considerable internal drama. The northern settlements need connectivity, Blake said. We've had 3 requests from refugee clusters in the high-altitude terrain north of here. They're surviving but they're isolated. A supply route would, I'll start planning it this week, Izuku said. Also, Ruby said, the school's running out of space. We need 2 more classrooms at minimum. Probably 4. Building plans are being updated. And the clinic needs a second surgeon, Weiss said. Dr. Kasha has been doing the work of 3 people. I know. I have 2 applications from Vale's medical program. I'll review them tomorrow. They went like this for a while, the ongoing work of the settlement, the endless list of things that needed doing, the comfortable rhythm of people who knew how each other thought and trusted each other's judgment. Not romance novel territory. Just life. Good, complicated, real life. Then Ruby stopped the list and turned to look at him. The others did too, because Ruby's tone changes were reliable indicators. Izuku, she said. Are you okay? He looked at her. At all of them. Yang with her arms crossed and her eyes warm. Weiss with her precise posture and the slight softness in her expression that she only let out around people she trusted. Blake with her ears up and attentive and her amber eyes reading him with the thoroughness she brought to everything. Below them, in the garden, Salem looked up. Caught his eye across the distance. Didn't wave, she was Salem, she didn't wave, but something in her posture acknowledged him. Present. Here. Choosing this. Was he okay? He'd been betrayed by his world and thrown through reality and arrived in an alien dimension hurt and alone, and his power had been unstable, and he'd had nothing except what was already in him, the analysis, the determination, the refusal to stop building even when what he'd built got taken apart. And from nothing, he'd built this. Yeah, he said. I'm okay. Ruby searched his face for the truth in it and found it. She nodded. Turned back to the view. They stood on the north wall of New Haven as the last light left the sky and the stars came out, different stars than his old worlds, arranged differently, but stars all the same, and the two moons rising pale and steady over everything he'd made. The walls held. They always held. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.